The House will please come to order. So members, we're right on the edge of a quorum, so we're going to do some just basic committee reports and things like that. And then hopefully our committees will get in from their noon meeting times. So reading clerk, committee reports, reports from standing committees, excuse me.
House Bill 6, sponsored by Select Water. ARPA funds for water and wastewater projects, an act relating to water and wastewater projects. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 2 appropriations, to whom is referred House Joint 6, Common School, no, that's the wrong bills, correction. Let me find it here. Appropriations instead of 6, so we should pull the. Can we have that one? And then take that one. Mr. Speaker, your number 2, committee number 2 appropriations, to whom is referred House Joint 5. Permanent Mineral Trust Fund Investments Distributions. Respectful report, same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes. Representatives Kinner, Larson Lloyd, Nicholas, Schwartz, Simpson, Stith, Walters. Representative Nicholas, Chairman. House Bill 34, sponsored by School Facilities, State Fund Investments and Distributions, an act relating to state funds. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 2 appropriations, to whom is referred House Bill 34, State Funds Investments and Distributions. Respectfully report, same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes. Representatives Kinner, Larson Lloyd, Simpson, Schwartz, Walters. Noes. Representatives Nicholas, Stith. Representative Nicholas, Chairman. House Bill 47, sponsored by Minerals, Local Impact Assistance Payments, an act relating to impact assistance payments. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 9, Minerals, Business and Economic Development, to whom is referred House Bill 47, Local Impact Assistance Payments. Respectfully report, same back to the House with the recommendation that do pass with the following amendments. Ayes. Representatives Bear, Burkhart, Duncan, Air, Gray, Greer, Heiner, Western. Noes. Representative Sherwood. Representative Greer, Chairman. House Bill 49, sponsored by Corporations, Elections Reporting Requirements, an act relating to elections. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 7, Corporations, Elections and Political Subdivisions, to whom is referred House Bill 49, Elections Reporting Requirements. Respectfully report, same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass with the following amendments. Ayes. Representatives Blackburn, Burt, Clausen, Duncan, Air, LeBeau, McGuire, Roscoe, Swanitzer. Representative Swanitzer, Chairman. House Bill 52, sponsored by Corporations, Timeline to prepare and process absentee ballots, an act relating to elections. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 7, Corporations, Elections and Political Subdivisions, to whom is referred House Bill 52, Timeline to prepare and process absentee ballots. Respectful report, same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass with the following amendments. Ayes. Representatives Blackburn, Burt, Clausen, Duncan, Air, LeBeau, McGuire, Roscoe, Swanitzer. Representative Swanitzer, Chairman. House Bill 62, sponsored by Corporations, Insurance Amendments, an act relating to insurance. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 7, Corporations, Elections and Political Subdivisions, to whom was referred House Bill 62, Insurance Amendments. Respectful report, same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass with the following amendments. Ayes. Representatives Blackburn, Burt, Clausen, Duncan, Air, LeBeau, McGuire, Roscoe, Swanitzer. Representative Swanitzer, Chairman. House Bill 65, sponsored by Representative Bear, County Tax Protest Filing Date, an act relating to ad valorem taxation. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 3, Revenue, to whom is referred House Bill 65, County Tax Protest filing date, respectful report, same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Baker, Gray, Hallinan, Harshman, Henderson, Jennings, Roscoe, Sweeney, Yin. Representative Harshman, Chairman. House Bill 79, sponsored by Appropriations, Employment Support Fund Amendments, an act relating to unemployment compensation. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 2 Appropriations, to whom is referred House Bill 79, Employment Support Fund Amendments, respectfully reports back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Kinner, Larson Lloyd, Nicholas, Schwartz, Simpson, Stith, Walters. Representative Nicholas, Chairman. House Joint Resolution 5, sponsored by Capital Financing. Permanent Mineral Trust Fund Investments and Distributions. A joint resolution proposing to amend the Wyoming Constitution to modify and modernize the Permanent Wyoming Mineral Trust Fund. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 2 Appropriations, to whom is referred House Joint 5, Permanent Mineral Trust Fund Investments and Distributions, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Kinner, Larson Lloyd, Nicholas, Schwartz, Simpson, Stith, Walters. Representative Nicholas, Chairman. House Joint Resolution 6, sponsored by Capital Financing, Common School Account Investments and Distributions. A joint resolution proposing to amend the Wyoming Constitution to modify and modernize the Common School Account within the Permanent Land Fund. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 2 Appropriations, to whom was referred House Joint 6, Common School Account Investments and Distributions, respectful report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Kinner, Larson Lloyd, Nicholas, Schwartz, Simpson, Stith, Walters. Representative Nicholas, Chairman.
All right, thank you, members. Representative Sherwood, you have a privilege of the floor. Would you please proceed?
Privilege of the floor, Mr.
Please,
Speaker.
please.
Thank you. Representative. So today we have with us in the gallery, the movers, the shakers, the people who give their heart and soul to our Wyoming communities. This is your Leadership Wyoming class of 2022.
Representative Kinner, please proceed.
Thank you for the privilege, Mr. Speaker. And ladies and gentlemen, Trey, you forgot to mention that this is the best class of 2022. Let's give them a big hand.
Well, thank you for being here. I think I've met maybe all of you before at Northeast Wyoming on the ranch. Little different circumstances, but we're so glad you're here, taking in this part of your class and this part of the state and participating in our process. We have another alumni here that is also a former member of this esteemed body. And I'm going to invite former Representative Rosie Berger to the mic to say a few words. So please welcome Rosie Berger.
I'll keep it short, Mr. Speaker. May I have privilege of the floor?
Please proceed. Madam
Thank you.
Minority Floor Leader at that time.
Thank you. Oh, wow. Well, it's the first time I've been back home since you moved back. And what an honor. I have toured it and led groups through, but I haven't stood on this floor, and I feel very privileged. And I just want to thank you for doing people's work. That's why we're here. And all across the state, I know that we appreciate you. You have a tough road ahead of you for the next few days. I look at the consent list and I think, how in the world are you going to get those bills through committee and get that work done? But ladies and gentlemen, please just take care of the budget so we can keep going and work on redistricting and just appreciate one another. After all, you know, you got letters from Kermit, former Speaker Brown, and former Representative Kirkbride this week, just encouraging you to be kind to each other, to be open, listen, and make good decisions, and go home and be proud for the work that you've done. Of course, it's ongoing. I would like to do a shout out, though, to your legislative staff and your session staff and the folks that are the wind beneath your wings. If you could give them an applaud. And I would just echo again how much I have enjoyed over the years Leadership Wyoming. I was from the best class ever of 2002.
Point of order.
And and that was my inspiration to actually run for office the first time. I will tell you, though, that the class of 2022 claims to be the best, had the governor sign a resolution today. He says it's only for today. So I'm not sure what they're going to do with that, but they were brave, they were courageous, and that's certainly what we learn in Leadership Wyoming. So continue to be bold. And thank you, Mr. Speaker and fellow members.
Thank you, Rosie. Appreciate you. Well, thank you very much. Great to have you back, Rosie, back in the House. Just for some members understand that for those in the class of 62, the 62nd legislature, you know, Rosie was one of those mentors, was one of those people that we leaned on, Chair of Appropriations. You know, she was doing heavy lifting, and now some of the class of 62 has taken up the work that she had done for many years before we got here. So it is fun to have her back in the House, and I can't hardly believe it's the first time since we've renovated, but on the floor, but it's a pleasure to have you here. And your class, you've got a good facilitator, a good mentor in Rosie Berger. All right, members, I think we have our committees back. Judiciary, I know, had a long meeting. Looks like Transportation. I'm looking at who am I missing here? I think we got everybody. All right, we're getting close. All right, members. We're at that order of bills on second reading. And just so you'll know, members, we take second reading is taken up in numerical order. It just happened to work out this time that the redistricting bill is the last bill. And as you know, there's several amendments apparently. So we'll take these bills up. They go fairly quickly if there's no amendments, and then things, as we get to amendments, we take them up. I'll just remind the members that as we have an amendment, we have different rules on second reading. It's the amendment, the bringer of the amendment, and then first time, anybody can speak for a first time, and then a second time after we've exhausted first times, and then the bringer of the amendment has the final word. So we're gonna have, this is our second reading, so let's get back in the groove of things. I gotta be reminded as well. But the mover of the amendment, first times, second times, and then the closing out. All right, we're at that order of business on bills on second reading. First bill for our consideration is House Bill 4.
House Bill 4, sponsored by Agriculture. water permits, livestock on federal land, an act relating to water.
House Bill 4 having been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Here, no objection is so ordered. Next bill is House Bill 33.
House Bill 33, sponsored by Labor, Community Health Services, Continued Redesign Efforts, an act relating to public health and safety.
House Bill 33 having been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection is so ordered. Next bill for consideration is House Bill 39.
House Bill 39, sponsored by Judiciary, Pre-Application Determination for Licensing, an act relating to professions and occupations.
House Bill 39 having been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Next bill for our consideration is House Bill 53.
House Bill 53, sponsored by Transportation, Military Department, Discrimination of or Harassment Grievances, an act relating to discrimination and harassment grievances involving the Wyoming National Guard or Military Department.
Thank you. We do have an amendment. Chairman Burkhart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move second reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 53 and ask for your favorable consideration. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a language cleanup that was recommended to us by staff to be clear on what the intent of the dates were. So page 7, line 3, after the dates, delete biennium and insert fiscal year. And then after the following dates of 2025, 2026, delete biennium and insert fiscal year. And it just clarifies those time periods.
Discussion on the amendment. Discussion on the amendment. Discussion. Seeing no discussion. Members, we're voting on second reading amendment number 1, House Bill 53. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, no. The amendment is adopted. House Bill 53 having been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection is so ordered. Next bill for our consideration is House Bill 70.
House Bill 70, sponsored by Blockchain, Digital Identity Protection, an act relating to digital identity.
House Bill 70 having been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection is so ordered. Next bill for our consideration is House Bill 100.
House Bill 100, sponsored by corporations, redistricting of the legislature, an act relating to the state legislative districts.
We do have amendments. First amendment is amendment number 1. Just stand at ease for just a moment. All right, the first amendment is Representative Stith. Please proceed.
Mr. Speaker, I move second reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 100 and ask for your favorable consideration. So members, I think these redistricting amendments are really hard to read. The only way to really understand them is to look at the map. But as I discussed yesterday, this amendment would call for a redistricting plan that has 60 House seats, 30 Senate seats. The basic theme here is that even if you don't like this particular plan that's attached here to this amendment, a bad 60-30 plan is better than the best 62-31 plan, okay? So if you're not thrilled about this particular version of a 60-30 plan, please vote aye, and then we can make changes accordingly, either on third reading or as we need to. So if you, to get to what this map actually is, I think the way I get to it is to go to the Wyoming Legislative Service Office homepage. And for everybody out there in virtual world or in the audience here today, the Wyoming Legislative Service Office homepage, click on the 3 dots, you click over to get to the redistricting portal and proposed maps. Under proposed maps, although I would never use the name of an individual, It turns out that the name of this map is named after an individual who is also the longest serving legislator in the state legislature over any other body. And it's the House 60 plan. I believe we have it on the screen now. There may be, so what this does is that it's fully compliant with the Constitution because all of the districts are within plus or minus 5% of the ideal population. So it's compliant. You don't have to worry about a court challenge to it. You've seen, I believe you may have seen this map before. We can argue about specific lines, whether say in Upper Lincoln County, whether you want the district line to be drawn exactly the way it is, or for House District 20, whether you want the line to be drawn exactly the way it is. Similarly, on the eastern side of the state. But the point is, and the big picture here is, and the reason that an aye vote is called for here is that there's just no compelling need to increase the size of the legislature. A year ago, we made painful budget cuts. We cut $430 million from the budget. We cut over 300 full-time positions. And you will see in the budget bill we will discuss next week, those positions are not coming back. We've made essentially permanent cuts to the base employee level of our state agencies. And for us to do that, to make those painful cuts for our state employees who actually provide direct services to the constituents, to our people, to say that, well, 90 legislators is not enough, we have to have 93, doesn't really make any sense. And although, and folks, it's just not that hard to have a 60-30 plan, okay? So for example, you may live in an area that's bounded on all sides by mountainous regions. You may live in a basin area, and you may think, well, we need a 62-31 plan so that we can keep that all whole. Well, it's not that difficult. You can have a 60-30 plan, keep the basin all together. And yes, it's true, you have to go over the mountain. You have to grab maybe 300 or 400 people from Natrona County to make the numbers work for your area. But what's wrong with that? There's nothing wrong with that. And it doesn't, and the 60-30 plan doesn't hurt anyone in that region. I think the average voter on the street, if we're trying to explain to them why we increase the size of the legislature, there's just not any explanation that makes a lot of sense. I have not had any constituent come up to me and say, well, what our state really needs, the problem we really need to solve is we don't have enough politicians. We need more. I've never heard anyone say that, ever. So there's no reason to unnecessarily grow the size of the legislature. It sends the wrong message. Our population has gone up by, in the last 10 years, by just a little over 1%, and yet the 62-31 plan would increase the size of the legislature by 3.3%. There's just no reason to do that. So folks, please vote aye on this amendment. And then if you don't like how this particular map is drawn, there are other alternatives that have been worked on for a 60 house plan that are also on the website. For example, one other perfectly acceptable 60-30 split is the version that's also on the website that was considered by the Joint Corporations Committee on January 27th of this year. That would work perfectly fine too. We can do, let's just do something reasonable. There's no reason to do something unnecessary. There's no reason to grow the size of government. So with that, I would ask for your aye vote. Thank you.
Majority Floor Leader Summers, first time.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. And I do appreciate the debate because I think we just as well have it now as later. But I'm on and against this plan, and this is a plan. If there was another plan that was a 60-30 that was better for the state of Wyoming, that should have been brought, and it still can be. But the challenge with this plan for me and for my area is the same as it has been, and that is you're trying to solve a loss in population in Carbon County. So think about clear to the edge of Albany by trying to compensate clear by the population gain in Teton County. that's a long ways to solve a problem. And so it elongates districts and it cuts up my county. And particularly it splits my southern community. And so on and against this particular map.
Any other member first time? First time? Representative Baker for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and in support of the amendment. I think that this is a good idea. And I think that if we just step back for a minute, in my mind, the other plan, the 6231, is really just a product of kind of, dysfunction. I mean, it was kind of just settled on, and I think, to move the process forward. So here we are on the floor. It's time for us to, put our wheels to the road and get this done. But I think that having this debate and really right-sizing government and staying within what the public wants and really wants and perceives as being fiscally accountable, I really do think there is something to that argument of growing the size of government when we're cutting all these other places. So on in the support of the 60/30 plan.
Members, I'm going to ask you to refrain from assigning motives or quality to the work of the body. I think there's enough interest here. Let's keep it above that. Representative Duncan, first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I really caution the body. This plan was looked at, as well as a different 60/30. We divided up in regions. We all worked. We all submitted plans from our regions. We worked diligently and hard to try and make a 60/30 work. We couldn't. It was difficult. And then when we had a 62/31 plan, it fell into place pretty easily. We just had to tweak a few lines here and there. So when we say that, oh, we could take this and just, a poor map is better than the other map, that there's a lot of work that went into it. And the fact that the deviations didn't work in this map. There are critical parts when you look at Fremont County and the basin. There are critical parts in there that really, really were the crux and the difficulties that we had. We had problems up in the Park County area. We had problems down in Laramie County. We had problems along the west side. We had problems along the east side. There were problems in every corner of the state. It's not as simple as people are making it believe. It was very difficult. So to be able to just take a poor map, quote unquote, it's not that simple. There are deviations that we have to think about. So we tried for months and hours. So I caution you to just quickly dismiss the amount of hours and the amount of work and the number of people and your clerks working. The clerks have gone through and they have made sure that there aren't splits. They've made sure the precincts are correct and that we're ready to go straight into ballots and preparing for elections. If we drop everything at this point, we're starting from scratch. And that's a lot of burden and work on our local clerks. I caution you to vote against the amendment.
Thank you. Representative Bear for your first time, then Madam Minority Floor Leader. Representative Bear, first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to address the issue that was brought by the bringer of the amendment about this growing of government. And I want to tell you what the alternative is. If you have a 62 plan, that's 2 more representatives in the state. Doing the math, each of us would have approximately 300 fewer people to represent. That means that those 9,300 people that you do represent are closer to each of you. And that's good governance. I approximate the expense of this additional 2 representatives to be somewhere between $150,000 to $200,000 a year, depending on the amount of hours necessary for LSO to support those 2. And I think that's a small price to pay for this additional representation. And more specifically, yesterday we heard from the good minority floor leader that this 62 plan would allow more rural representation at a time where we're seeing lots of people move to the urban areas. And I want to give you more detail about exactly what I believe she means, and I do agree with her statement. You know, many times as we work these maps and we're working in rural areas, to get up to the 93 or the 9600, you have to dip into an urban area to get enough population to have a representative for that area. And it may be on the map a large area of rural, but there's that small area of urban that's attached to it that has a lot of people in it. And so if we really are interested in protecting the rural vote, the 62 plan is preferred to the 60 plan. Also, the cost, I just don't believe it's an issue because of the small amount of the cost compared to the additional representation every single person in the state of Wyoming will receive. Thank you. On and against the amendment.
Thank you. That was your first time. Representative, Madam Minority Floor Leader Connolly, first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just first for a second.
Thank you. Chairman Eklund, first time.
I'll do a first for a first. I don't usually speak up much on this. I'd advise everybody to listen closely as we go through this 60-30 plan. I don't mind the 62-31 plan. The biggest problem we're going to run into from the House side is getting 2 more desks into this chamber. I'm just not sure how you fit any more of us in, and that's a big problem. It's not going to be a big expansion of government, but we're barely starting in this process, and we have friends down the hall that may come back to us with a plan that's a 60-30 and B. Listen up, because we'll have to eventually come to agreement, both houses. And I think we're a long ways from settling this, even though it seems to work. The 62-31 works well in the House. It might not over there.
Thank you, Chairman Burkhart, then Chairman Greer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yeah, a voice you haven't heard from on redistricting. With this plan, looking at it and looking at House District 15 and 47, there are some errors that'll need corrected. In effect, we put literally one individual in one precinct, which you can't do because their vote would be known. So if you go with this, it's going to need some amendments quickly.
Thank you. Chairman Greer, first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Everybody gets up here and says they appreciate the bringer of the amendment before they bash on it. And so in the interest of honesty, I won't say that. The simple fact is this is a process, and it's a painful process. And we've heard this and we recognize how painful it is. The reason we ended up with a 62 House member plan was because the 60 House seat plan was worked, and it could not overcome some significant hurdles. One of them being from the Bighorn Basin. Another one being some desires along the western side of the state, eastern side of the state, some needs along the eastern side of the state with respect to the county in which we reside right now. And then you clear over on the west side of the state. There were just some fundamental problems that couldn't be overcome with a 60 plan. So we went down that path. It was too late to drop back, because the other option was to go, which could have worked, was a 54 House member plan. Okay, it'd be fine. But we didn't have sort of the background or the information or the input from the citizens, from the clerks, to really go that far. So when the 62 plan came out, we started looking at, okay, these problems, these hurdles, now we were able to overcome them. We were more able to accommodate our constituents within our individual districts, but more specifically, regions. And I'll just say most people looked at things in a regional mindset. So it got us to a point where we were able to bring a plan forward that required a couple of amendments, So the two amendments we heard yesterday were two areas of conflict that were resolved by this body like we're supposed to do it. I just think to take that work where we've already come down this path, and it's been a darn good path that we've done. Messy, but it's the right path. And just throw it out is the wrong step to do. This plan with the 60 House seats on it has, I couldn't go through, it'd be pages of issues that we sat down and wrote out all of the different issues associated with it. Issues that were brought to the committee, were brought to the people, to the legislators that were meeting in their districts. Not going to do that. So I'd ask for a no vote on this. Just continue, as the good speaker said, we're moving through the innings on this. Just get the plan that's before us refined. So with that, thank you.
Thank you, Representative Yin, then Representative Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So one thing I do want to point out with the 60 map versus the 62 is that it does hurt one of our principles of redistricting, which was try to reduce the number of county splits. So in this situation, at least one of the House districts goes from 3 to 4, and there's several that split counties when they didn't previously split counties. So one had counties that were just by themselves, and then it went into another county. So House districts are being split in this, and so I think it makes it harder to be a representative for multiple counties unnecessarily when we try to do that. In addition, it adds another bit with the Senate portion. So when we nest these into Senate districts, you have a couple of districts that go, there's at least one that becomes from a 4-district Senate seat, 4-county Senate seat to a 5-county Senate seat. So for example, the senator that represents House District 18 and House District 20 now goes into a 5th county. And then you have the Senate District 20, which is in the Bighorn Basin, which it went from 5 counties to going into 6 counties. So is it really a good idea in the best interest? Like, I can make the ones for communities of interest, but even when we split another county and that senator has to represent 6 different counties, is that really what we should be doing? So I do think the 62 plan is in the best interest of both our rural and our cities and towns. And I do think it also is in the best interest of just having the best representation for the state of Wyoming. So I would urge you to vote no. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Blackburn, for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've said before, I could probably live with a 60-30 plan. This is not the one. If I look at the changes that were made or were not made across the state, it looks to me like this is only good for one particular, maybe 2 regions. If we're not concerned about the whole state, then this is garbage. So I really urge a no vote on this. Thank you.
Again, members, let's caution ourselves about how we characterize efforts and work that's been done, please. For your first time, Representative McGuire.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I do appreciate the opportunity to work on the committee. It was very interesting, and so we worked through it. We started out with the 60-30 plan, and we did work through a viable 60-30 plan, and we had all of the clerks submit the information, and we were at the end of that process when the 62-31 plan came up. And then that became the focus of the committee. I'd just like to make sure everybody understands it was not a unanimous vote at the end. There were still members who were split one way or the other and wanted to continue to work the 60-30 plan. And part of the reason is, and I think that the bringer of the amendment hit the nail on the head. We have, cut and cut and cut and taken away from these various departments. We've taken away employees, and now the message is, well, when the going got tough, we're going to go with a 62-member plan. Whether or not that's right, and I'm not alluding to any individuals, I'm just saying that we have to look at what the people on the outside see and see what the message is. And I believe that we should always lead by example. So I rise in favor of the amendment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Representative Hallinan and then Representative Ottman. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman or Mr. Speaker. I rise to say that there is a sister state of ours, New Hampshire, that has 400 members of their lower house. That means there are 3,400 and some odd people per representative. So I don't think it's unreasonable to go to 61 representatives for Wyoming. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I'm thankful there wasn't a higher number in the plan. Representative Ottman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've listened to the debates on both, well, lots of different plans, and I know we all have a lot to think about, but I would just ask the bringer of this amendment, with this particular one, we alluded to the area that could be brought in from Natrona, but this map doesn't even address that. It doesn't, I mean, it doesn't do that. So for me to trust that that may be done, I would like to see that on the map. Thank you.
So members, we're on first time, second reading. Amendment number 2 to House Bill 100. Any other member for their first time? We're on first time. Representative Clausen, Vice Chairman Clausen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So towards this map and all maps, so when we ran into this in redistricting, all of these maps are good and they're all good ideas, but you did the same thing we did for months and months, as we moved the friction around and we did that yesterday, and these are all, every map is a good idea except for somewhere. And what we landed on was where we could find the least amount of friction, and I'm not going to speak for or against this map. I just want everybody to know every single idea is good for somewhere and not good for somewhere else in this ripple in this process, and keep that in mind. And when we do this, that all of these are great ideas, just not in all places.
Thank you. Representative Roscoe, first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would just like to express to the body that all the members that have just gotten up from the corporations committee and given really valid reasons why we ended up with a 62-31. And we struggled from the beginning with this plan, but then we did eventually, after months of testimony from public, we all went back to our communities at the public testimony and then came back and we did vote this one down. So on and against this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Members, any other members for their first time? Members, first time, first time, first time, second time. Any member that spoke the first time has a second opportunity. A second opportunity, second opportunity. Back to the bringer of the amendment, Representative Stiff.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. Just to address the comments briefly, the representative from District 16 talked about adhering to the principles that the Corporations Committee set forth. And one of those principles set forth in August was that we would have a 60-30 plan. That was a basic core principle that the Corporations Committee followed all the way through until January. With respect to county splits, another issue raised by House District 16 representative, my county is split on both the east and the west sides under any plan. And we're good with that. And there's nothing wrong with that, because actually having your county split actually helps you get things done for your county. Because, for example, when we have an issue with our local school district, we've got a representative who lives all the way over in Carbon County who makes the effort to come over to our school district to talk to us. And so it actually, having our county split by House districts actually magnifies our local representation. It's not necessarily a disadvantage. With respect to the comments about by the representatives from District 31 and 32 concerning the number of people per district, as I mentioned yesterday, our neighboring states have far fewer legislators per 1,000 inhabitants. Utah, it's 1 per 30,000. Nebraska, 1 legislator for every 42,000 residents. Colorado, 1 for every 57,000 residents. Montana is closer to us. It has one member of its legislature for every 7,200 residents. Under our existing 60-30 plan, we've got one legislator for every 6,400 residents. The 62-31 plan would reduce that down to 6,193 roughly. There's just no reason to go that direction. Finally, with respect to the comments from the representative from District 27, I certainly appreciate his candor about his enthusiasm for this debate. But in terms of going down this path, the path that we were going down was to preserve the 60-30 structure. And frankly, it was only at the last minute within the last few weeks that it was changed to the 62-31 plan. Again, ask yourselves, is there a compelling need to do that? I think if we work hard, we can make a 60-30 plan work. Thank you for your time and request an aye vote.
So members, we're voting on second reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 100. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, no. The amendment has not been adopted. Next amendment for consideration is second reading amendment number 2. Representative Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move second reading amendment number 2 to House Bill 100 and do ask for your favorable consideration. So probably not going to get deep into a policy discussion here, and I apologize if you were eagerly awaiting as competitive of a policy conversation as we just had. But this is simply an amendment in Laramie County, affects only Laramie County, and actually really only affects 2 districts. So if we could actually, can we pull up the existing map without this amendment? Real quick. It's just easier, I think, to visualize this.
So members, apparently there's someone behind the curtain.
Yeah.
Please proceed.
That's really tricky. I like it. It's very slick. Okay. So we're looking at downtown Cheyenne. In the amendment that we adopted on the first reading, we had some lines that were probably not as straight as they could be. We created a tomahawk steak in the middle of Cheyenne, and with a bone that had been picked clean. So all this does is move 2 neighborhoods between 2 districts. When it does that, it restores a neighborhood that's actually split along a major thoroughway in Cheyenne called Nation Way. That's down where where we're pointing to right now. So that is right above that area is Lincoln Way. So it's a nice, clean, straight line on Lincoln Way. And then when we go over to the west side, we draw a line on Pershing, major thoroughway, and just separate the districts at Pershing, nice and clean. And then if you look at the language of your amendment, it does bring in House 9. That's up. Up there. Brings in House 9 right there. On that section, though, however, we have, and maybe the chairman of corporations would be better to speak to this than me when we get there, but we have identified some issues in working with our clerks, that being one of them. So that will actually have to be adjusted on a third reading amendment. So we will deal with that on a separate amendment. And then the other district that's affected, if you look at the writing, is down in that corner, and it's literally a corner of, I think, about 20 people or so. So just what we had to do, of course, was bring every district, those 4 districts within deviation. So just some slight adjustments to those outer lying districts there. But that's really it. Looks more like, honestly, what it looks like in downtown Cheyenne right now, but more importantly, draws those neighborhood lines across major streets. So we're not dividing known and existing neighborhoods. Really pretty straightforward amendment. But I will take any questions.
Thank you. First time, Representative Henderson on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And as you see, I'm signed on to this. And my question is an introspective one for every one of us. Are we better off if we work as neighbors in this process within our communities? And I think the answer to that is of course, yes. And so this is an example of that happening here. You know, we had the good words of the speaker yesterday and others. And for those listening who are concerned about other parts of our county, we still have third reading and we still have other inputs that are being considered by all of the delegations, and every one of us are very interested in making sure your views are represented. But I just want to show you an example of neighbors working with neighbors. And then also during the last census, just very briefly, you know, we had a net increase of say around 13,000 something. And I mentioned yesterday the importance of our diversity and our ethnic backgrounds in the development of our communities in our state. And the ethnic background in our state that grew the most was the Hispanic one. And I'd urge you, I mean, I put hours into this as you all have, but I look at that little thing in the one program where you can see the, you know, how it racks up among the different ethnic backgrounds. And then I compare that to the state into my district. And I think the way this is shown, if you look at my district, and I'd be glad to provide that information if you can't find it, but it reflects almost exactly that increase, if you will, that percentage of growth in our Hispanic population. And I just want to show that as a way of working with our neighbors. That's all, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much. Any other member for their first time? Second reading amendment number 2. Chairman Zwanitzer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just wanted to add my support for this map. We do have about 4 suggested amendments from our county clerk, and I did get to incorporate 2 of them into this map. That District 9, that the pink district, and on the top of the blue district on that map, you'll see where that kind of a cutout shape is. That's right below the mall. I know many of you have been there here in Cheyenne, and so we have about 100 people down there. They are in our Ward 2 for our city council, and so it did make sense to put them up into House District 9. Didn't affect deviations, and actually I think the representatives in all 3 of these districts are actually happier with their districts than they were from the map yesterday. So I think it's a win-win for everyone and would encourage your support.
Thank you. Any other members for their first time? Representative Duncan, first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just wanted to address a little bit from our committee meeting. There was quite a bit with the, we did do some research. We did ask for our LSO personnel to do some work for our minority potential districts and such in Cheyenne and some of the other areas across the state. And so we do take into consideration, make sure, because there is a certain percentage to make sure that you have the right population in the districts and such. And we did do that. We conducted that in certain areas within that Cheyenne population. So that was made sure that we were cognizant of that. We were making sure that we weren't disenfranchising anyone. So I just want to make sure and let everybody know that we took all of those things into consideration. So if all the parties of this area for this map, I would definitely encourage an aye vote on this.
Thank you. Any other member first time? First time. Any other member? Romero Martinez, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I agree with the previous 3 speakers, and I support this map. Thank you.
Any other member for their first time? First time. First time, second time before the sponsor. Second time. All right, members, we are voting on second reading amendment number 2 to House Bill 100. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, no. The amendment is adopted. Next amendment for our consideration is second reading amendment number 3. Representative Bear.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move House Bill number 100, second reading amendment number 3. And I'll give the explanation. If we could zoom way into where the change is on the southern part of House District 53. And that is House District 31 that is in the brown below there. And so I had to check this out. I want to back up a little bit and remind everybody that the speaker had requested that we bring our big amendments in the beginning. We did that yesterday. And then that allows our stakeholders back home to look at those maps and bring any changes that they might feel necessary so that we could discuss those. And that's exactly what this is. The clerk in our county found a few splits, and that's what this amendment is about, is to correct those splits. This particular change here is moving two buildings which belong to one business, which that business I'm familiar with, that they wind motors for the coal mining industry and amongst other machining things that they do. And I deliver dry cleaning there, and I'm pretty sure I haven't seen any caught. So I don't think we're actually moving any voters in this particular situation. But the representative on either side of that line are sponsors of this amendment. So we're amiable to this move here, and this helps the clerk out. Now, if the map could be moved up to the other area, there's a tiny, tiny little change here. And I spoke to the representative that currently represents the pink area there. He was willing to give up this small area. It's about 100 yards of railroad track. And he assured me that anyone that was inside a rail car would not be a part of his party. So he had no concern with giving that part to the Brown District, House District 31. So with that explanation, I just ask for your favorable vote on this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Any members want to speak for a first time? First time, second time? Back where members were voting on second reading amendment number 3, House Bill 100. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, no. The amendment is adopted. House Bill 100, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection is so ordered. Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move the consent list consisting of the following bills. Third reading consent list, House Bill 21, 22, 59, 78.
Would any member like any of these 4 bills removed from the consent list? Any member like any bill removed from the consent list? Any member like a bill removed from the consent list? Seeing none. Reading clerk, please read the consent list.
House Bill 21, sponsored by Revenue, repealing exemption for one-way pagers, an act relating to sales tax exemptions being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming. House Bill 22, sponsored by Revenue, industrial revenue bonds, pilot payments, an act relating to industrial development projects being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming. House Bill 59, sponsored by Appropriations, workers' compensation, COVID-19, an act relating to workers' compensation being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming. House Bill 78, sponsored by Appropriations, bid rejection or denial of public works contracting, an act relating to public works being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
Having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall these bills pass? Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Roll call on the consent list. Andrew, Baker, Banks, Bear, Blackburn, Brown excused, Burkhart, Burt, Clausen, Connolly, Crago, Duncan, Eklund, Air, Flitner, Fortner, Gray, Greer, Hallinan, Haroldson, Harshman, Heiner, Henderson, Jennings, Kenner, Knapp, Larson Lloyd, Larson Dan, LeBeau, McGuire, Nyman, Newsom, Nicholas, Oakley, Obermuller, O'Hearn, Olson, Ottman, Paxton, Provenza, Rodriguez Williams, Romero Martinez, Roscoe, Schwartz, Sherwood, Simpson, Summers, Stith, Stybar, Sweeney, Walters, Washit, Western, Wharf, Williams, Wilson, Winter, Yen, Zwanitzer. Mr. Speaker, we have 59 aye, 1 excused. As for House Bill 21, are there any changes? Are there any changes? Closing vote. Vote is closed. 59 aye, 1 excused. As for House Bill 22, are there any changes? Gray, aye to no. Burt, aye to no. Burkhart, aye to no. Nyman, aye to no. Rodriguez Williams, aye to no. Knapp, aye to no. Greer, aye to no. Winter, aye to no. Larson Dan, aye to no. Bear, aye to no. Fortner, aye to no. Jennings, aye to no. Crago, aye to no. Stybar, aye to no. Haroldson, aye to no. Blackburn, aye to no. Heiner, aye to no. Further changes? Ottman, aye to no. Further changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 41 aye, 18 no, 1 excused. As for House Bill 59, are there any changes? Are there any changes? Closing vote. Vote is closed. 59 aye, 1 excused. And as for House Bill 78, are there any changes? Greer, aye to no. Crago, aye to no. Jennings, aye to no. Oakley, aye to no. Bear, aye to no. Fortner, aye to no. Further changes? Close. Winter, aye to no. Blackburn, aye to no. Summers, aye to no. Further changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 50 aye, 9 no, 1 excused.
Members, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the House, House Bill 21, 22, 59, and 78 have passed the House. We're at that order of business of bills on third reading, final passage, regular list. First bill for our consideration, House Bill 7.
House Bill 7, sponsored by Transportation, Commercial Vehicle Driving Disqualification, an act relating to commercial vehicles being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
We do have an amendment. Representative O'Hearn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move third reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 007 and ask for your favorable consideration. I'll mention the need for the amendment while I'm going through the bill. This bill relates to commercial motor vehicles, amending offenses that disqualify a person, amends rules, and provides for an effective date. The original bill didn't show all the different subsections, and I'm going to go through those real quickly. What is in Wyoming State Statute 31-7305, but not specifically mentioned in this bill, is that in subsection A, a driver will lose their license for not less than 1 year if convicted of any of the 9 violations listed in subsection A. One of those is a DUI. Subsection B states that the penalties is increased to not less than 3 years if one is convicted of one of those 9, if they're carrying hazmat or hazardous materials. Subsection C states that a person may be disqualified for life if convicted of 2 or more violations of any of those specified in subsection A. Which brings us to subsection D and E, which is the new bill and the new language and the need for the amendment. On page 2 of line 4, states that any subsequent conviction of another disqualifying offense under subsection A, not C, shall not be eligible for reduction under these sections. Line 6 is where the amendment is removing subsection C and changing it to A. Line subsection E, which has been separated into 2 subparagraphs. On line 12, the word may has been struck and one shall be disqualified for life if one of is convicted of either Romanet 1 or Romanet double I. Romanet I has been added to our current statutes to meet federal requirements. Transporting drugs or humans with felonious intent will get the driver a lifetime disqualification with no eligibility reduction. So it's one and done. This bill ensures compliance with the Commercial Motor Vehicle Safety Act and the latest FMCS requirements so that our truckers can continue with their interstate commerce. I, along with our state folks that manage our highways and CDL licensing and the state's trucking association, will ask for your favorable consideration of this amendment and bill. I'll stand for questions.
Thank you. Members for the first time, Chairman Greer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I'll rise in support of the amendment. It fixes the problems I had brought up on committee of the whole. I do, maybe to make this a little clearer for the body, what we're saying, and I'll just use the example of a DUI for a truck driver with a CDL. Okay, they're suspended for a year. Happens a second time, they can lose their license for life. However, they can appeal or be reinstated after 10 years for that type of offense. With this amendment in the fix, what we're saying is that if you get free, you truly are done. There's no way to be reinstated. So it's a little more stringent than federal law, probably not a bad thing. The other thing, Dan, that was clear that we had to get is if you are convicted of a violation for human trafficking or trafficking drugs, you lose your license with no hope, with no ability to have it reinstated. It is truly a life ban. So that's the cleanup on it. I think it's a lot clearer now, and I appreciate the work of the bringer of the amendment. Thank you. And I'm sincere about that.
Thank you. Any other member of their first time? Sincerely, any other member from their first time? First time? First time? Seeing none. Second time? Members, we're voting on third reading, amendment number 1, House Bill 7. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, no. Amendment is adopted. House Bill 7, having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall the bill pass? Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Andrew, Baker, Banks, Bear, Blackburn, Brown excused, Burkhart, Burt, Clausen, Connolly, Crago, Duncan, Eklund, Air, Flitner, Fortner, Gray, Greer, Hallinan, Haroldson, Harshman, Heiner, Henderson, Jennings, Kenner, Knapp, Larson Lloyd, Larson Dan, LeBeau, McGuire, Nyman, Newsom, Nicholas, Oakley, Obermuller, O'Hearn, Olson, Ottman, Paxton, Provenza, Rodriguez Williams, Romero Martinez, Roscoe, Schwartz, Sherwood, Simpson, Summers, Stith, Stivar, Sweeney, Walters, Washit, Western, Wharf, Williams, Wilson, Winter, Yin, Zawanitzer. Mr. Speaker. Closing vote. Are there any changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 59 aye, 1 excused.
House Bill 7, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the House, House Bill 7 has passed the House. Next bill for our consideration is House Bill 42. Reading clerk.
House, House Bill 42, sponsored by appropriations, local government distributions, an act relating to local government funding being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
We do have an amendment. Chairman Harshman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd move third reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 42. Ask for your favorable consideration. Members, this amendment only adds to the bill right now is direct distribution. 105 million. We've been there for a long time. And recall, we started direct distribution when we took the sales tax off food. And it was part of that makeup with local governments. And then we used to fight over it every year, how it's going to be distributed. And we've come to an agreement now on a formula named after a former member here from Johnson County. And so this doesn't touch any of that. The direct distribution, the matrix, how it's just distributed. Really what I want to do with this amendment is move some of this kind of state control to our local elected people. And the way we used to do it, and we haven't done it for a couple of years, called direct county consensus funding. And so we used to always have direct distribution. We'd have county consensus. And we had some budgets, I think, 70 million, 50 million a biennium, 35 million a biennium. And so this is much more modest than that, asking really for 15 million that will go out to our counties based on population. And then if you read the text of the amendment, it's just like we used to do. 70% of those municipalities have to agree. So if it comes to your county, it's not just the biggest town in your county or any of that. They all got to agree on a project. And then furthermore, this requires a 1-to-1 match. For these are capital type projects, and it says in the amendment for economic development or community enhancement. And I just think we're missing some of this because there's so much of this driven from the slip board, frankly, with these MRG grants. And a lot of it's driven from state agency kind of, and I think empowering locals a little bit too, and locally elected folks to do this, working with the citizens in their community. So that's really what I'm trying to do. I think 15 million is really a modest amount, and I'd stand for any questions. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Any member for the first time? First time, Chairman Flitner, first time.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. And for the bringer of the amendment. So for instance, if a county cannot come to consensus on how to use those funds or come up with the match, then what happens with those dollars?
Representative Henderson, first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to build on that a little bit. But my thought is where would these funds reside? And then what happens if at the end of a fiscal period here, we still have funds available? And is there going to be like a waiting list where communities, entities get in line for this?
Thank you. Any other member first time? First time, Chairman Greer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I co-sponsored this and the good chairman of revenue did a good job of kind of laying out the history of this. We look at what do we do for economic development in the state of Wyoming and how do we make it effective? And so I really do appreciate this community enhancements and economic development, capital projects. What we're seeing is this blur of what is economic development and what's a community enhancement to bring people in. So he has addressed this in a very nice way. But what is better about this is that these funds are going to go to those communities that are helping themselves. So that means they're going to be able to raise the funds that are there for a project that area believes in. And they're going to be able to double up their money, and they're going to be able to do these projects. And I truly believe, and it's the reason I signed on, that we are going to see much better use of these dollars than we've seen out of some of the other programs with that. So I encourage an aye vote.
Thank you. Chairman Burkhart, first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members of the 66th, I'm inclined to support this, but with some trepidation. And a couple things. It's third reading, so we can't do much with it later. I question whether the 15 million is really enough to make an impact. I mean, you can build a relatively small building and it's, you know, right now, probably 6 to 7 million. And that it will help the communities. I can remember when we did this the last time, and there is a county in the state that has only, I think it's 2 or 3 municipalities in it. And the concern is that any one of those municipalities could, in effect, under this formula, kind of destroy the idea for the rest of the county. And that, I remember some discussion we had that some of the county commissioners did not like this because it forced communities to, I guess you could say, disagree with each other over who got the money for what. Like I said, I'm inclined to support it, but just wish we could put a little more detail, sideboards in it, but it's a third reading. So maybe the Senate can address some of those issues I've raised. And I apologize for mentioning the other body.
Your apology is noted. Representative Larson Lloyd, first time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would encourage the body to reject this amendment. I think one of the things we have to realize is we take this 15 million out now, that's $15 million of general funds that you're not going to have in the budget to look at other things that you've been trying to do, whether it be for Department of Health things or community providers or state parks or anything in there. Now, I do this in the face of my county commissioner sitting in the balcony who I know would love to have this extra money here. But I think that you also, as we get into the ARPA direct bill that comes through here in the next couple of weeks, you're going to find that we have a lot of money in there for local governments. And then we just heard, we've got one bill that'll be coming in that we heard in appropriations and cleared out today that has $95 million in for water and sewer projects that funds 85% of that. The locals only have to fund 15% of that. This is a 1-to-1 match. I think that the governor, I think you'll hear some additional testimony that we've got additional $100 or $1 million that the governor has for local discretion that'll be through the ARPA funds. One of the things that I've heard, and maybe my good friend from the land of Juan can help us understand, is if this is consensus and all of the communities have to consent to this project, but it requires a 1-to-1 match. So in my county, where I may have a couple of small communities that only has one business that generates sales tax, they may not be able to meet a 1-to-1 on perhaps a fire hydrant or some sort of water project, even if it was only $20,000. So then what happens to that? Well, it remains in there, and the larger communities that do have the funds available to do it can capture that and use it. So I don't know that the 1-to-1 match is really beneficial, particularly to the smaller communities. Again, you know, I understand the intent, and we're all here to help our local communities, but I think that we're with the pretty enormous amount of one-time funds coming through conserved general funds and through the ARPA funds, I think will be, and funding this, I think we heard from our locals that they're very pleased that we got the 105 here. So I would just encourage us to vote this down and keep it as it is.
Madam Minority Floor Leader, and then go Representative Knapp.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and in favor of this amendment. Friends, I'm from the community, the county that one of the good former representatives talked about, where there can be problems in communities and counties and in the method to go about what's called this consensus revenue. I live in a county with 35,000 people, and 30 of them live within the city limits of one city, and 250 live in another city, and then we have the county. So you have the ability of that small city, the small city had the ability to defeat the consensus. And that happened occasionally, right? It did. And that's a problem, right? But the reality is the ability to compete for this consensus revenue made all the difference in my county. It forced the two cities to come together with the county in order to put forth a grant application, and often, not always, was successful. We talk about the $105 million in direct distribution as if that's the money that has just always existed. But know that until recently, there was this additional money. The amount of it changed, and from the looks of it, it averaged about $70 million a year. This is very modest, $15 million from zero last year and the year before that and the year before that. 15 million is modest. There's an element in here that there has to be matching. Again, you know what? I think that's going to be hard for my community, but still it gives my community, and I think many of yours, an opportunity to do economic development that it really needs and wants, and that we all need and want. So on and in favor. Thank you.
Thank you. A former commissioner, Representative Knapp.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and against the amendment, I would much rather see if it were to take place for that money to go to SLIB as individual projects. It sounds good, but on the ground, the way it works is there's no quicker way to cause ill will between entities than to try to come up with a consensus list to submit. Everybody has projects. You come together with 5 different projects of your own. Each one wants to get funded and they hash it out. I think going before SLIB is a great way to do it because each project is looked at individually, whether that project is a sound project or not. So on and against the amendment.
Thank you. Any other members first time? First time. Chairman Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I'm ambivalent about the amendment in some ways, but I think in order to vote on it, it's important to have more information. So we all know that the CARES Act and the ARPA Act had direct distributions to cities and counties. And so that's a pot of money that I think you ought to take into consideration. In the current ARPA bill, we provide $100 million for the governor to distribute to locals. So this would be added to that. We also add roughly $95 million in water projects for locals. We also have $55 million that will go for specific health projects like community emergency rooms that will go to locals. All told, there's probably, another 50 for locals. So all told, there are literally hundreds of millions of dollars going to locals that you're going to see coming through this body next week and the next week. And so it seems to me we need to add these all up together and think about them together before the first one comes along and you take a swat at it. Because I didn't really get a good look at this until just recently. I mean, it would have made sense to take 15 million out of the 100 million we're giving to the governor if this was a better distribution mechanism. And so the governor would only have 85 million. That might have been a better way to do this. But I just think we need to see the big picture along with the little picture.
Thank you. Any other member first time? We're on first time, third reading amendment number 1, House Bill 42. Any other member first time? First time, seeing none. Second time before the sponsor. Second time to the sponsor, Chairman Harshman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and members appreciate the good discussion. This is kind of the prelude to next week in the budget. And I just love how all the appropriators, and there were, I did that job for 10 years and they all got the mics and it's boom, boom, boom. And I'll just say that we used to do this distribution to locals in House Bill 1. I mean, that was part of the whole budget thing. And we broke that out. This is one of the budget bills. Came from committee number 2, hardest working committee in America. And I really appreciate all their work, but I just want to gently push back on a few of these things. There is not that kind of federal money flowing to the local governments. There's just not. And all of it, this pot of 50 million that is currently in House Bill 1 has strings attached to it. And so, I heard about, well, what if we don't address some of those questions? More strings attached than getting together with your fellow local electeds and deciding to finish something that you wanted to finish in your county or your community. And so I think that's that part of it. This bill, you can't go in and mess with all that kind of thing. That'll be next week. And that'll be a lot of fun. I'm really looking forward to it. But I want to talk about this bill, and this is our bill. And I appreciate the work that has been done on it, but this little piece has been missing because we've been flat broke. And I was chair of approps on the two biggest downturns in the state's history. Hey, it's been 7 tough years. But look at your goldenrod, and the print is so small, you're going to need an app to see the print. You can't see it. I had to put an app on my phone to magnify it. There's $640 million in the budget reserve account. There's $640 million. Now, what's the budget reserve account? It's budget reserve / general fund. There's $640 million. And we put it in the budget reserve account so the chief executive down below can't profile it and make requests out of it. That's the bottom line. That started out as a different type of account 30, 40 years ago. They are basically one account now, and that's how this works. So there's $640 million. The idea that to take 15 million, which would be the smallest county consensus funding of all time, that requires a match for the first time to make this 15 turn into 30 in our local communities, I don't think is asking too much and one of the biggest periods of boom times we've ever had. And I think to get away from this deal that the executive branch knows best, they can fly around and drop money out and help projects and know better. I don't think that's right. I think it's our locals who get together and work, and there might be a little tiny project that needs $500,000 they've been wanting to do for years. And that's what I'm trying to do. So I'm trying to start really small, a small amount of money, and let's put some of this at the local level. And so I really appreciate your aye vote on this. And we can, this little bit of seed money can grow some big stuff, because Wyoming's not going to bring in these 1,000 job things. We're not going to. We don't have the workforce right now. We're not going to get a big plant in Sweetwater County with 1,000 jobs. But we're going to get these 5 jobs, 10 jobs, 20 job things. And that's what we got to keep working on. And so again, appreciate your consideration and your good work, committee number 2. But this bill just needs a little help to make it a little bit better. And that's all we're trying to do. So I appreciate your aye vote. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Members are voting on third reading, amendment number 1, House Bill 42. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, no. Chair has no idea. All those in favor, please rise. Please rise and stand still. All those opposed, please rise. Okay, so the vote is 31-28. The amendment has been adopted. House Bill 42, as amended, has been read 3 separate times. The question is, shall the bill pass? Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Andrew, Baker, Banks, Bear, Blackburn, Brown excused, Burkhart, Burt, Clausen, Connolly, Crago, Duncan, Eklund, Air, Flitner, Fortner, Gray, Greer, Hallinan, Haroldson,
This is a third reading vote, members, please.
Haroldson, Harshman, Heiner, Henderson, Jennings, Kenner, Knapp, Larson Lloyd, Larson Dan, LeBeau, McGuire, Nyman, Newsom, Nicholas, Oakley, Obermuller, O'Hearn, Olson, Ottman, Paxton, Provenza, Rodriguez Williams, Romero Martinez, Roscoe, Schwartz, Sherwood, Simpson, Summers, Stith, Stivar, Sweeney, Walters, Washit, Western, Wharf, Williams, Wilson, Winter, Yin, Zawanitzer. Mr. Speaker. Closing vote. Are there any changes? Blackburn, no to aye. Further changes? Closing vote. Vote is closed. 49 aye, 10 no, 1 excused.
House Bill 42, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the House, House Bill 42 has passed the House. Representative Washit, please proceed with your privilege of the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Up in our gallery today, we have our Wyoming Association of Clerks of Court and Miss Jill Keister over here, a good friend of mine standing up here. Please give them a welcome to the House of Representatives.
All of our clerks. Well, wonderful to have our clerks here, part of our local elected officials. Great to have you. Welcome to the Capitol. Hope you're enjoying your stay. Any other further privileges? I'm sorry, Representative Larson, Dan, privilege of the floor, please proceed.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I want to recognize my better half for 43 years. She's upstairs, and it's great to have her here. Thank you.
Go ahead, Representative Larson.
A little bit more, I'm sorry. She's currently the president of the Wyoming Association for Career and Technical Education. There we go. Glad you're here to watch us.
Thank you. Congratulations, and thanks for all your work in education on behalf of Wyoming. You probably missed Valentine's Day, so he owes you. Yes, ma'am. You heard it. Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House resolve itself into committee of the whole.
You've heard the Majority Floor Leader's motion. All those in favor, please say aye. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, no. A little more enthusiasm. Representative Yin.
Members, thank you. So we only have a couple of bills on general file today. Committee of the whole will come to order. So the first bill for our consideration is House Bill number 9. The reading clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 9, sponsored by Select Tribal, Economic Development Programs, Tribal Inclusion, an act relating to the Eastern Shoshone and Northern Arapaho tribes. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 9, Minerals, Business, and Economic Development, to whom is referred House Bill 9, Economic Development Programs, Tribal Inclusion. Respectfully report, same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Burkhart, Duncan, Air, Gray, Greer, Heiner, Sherwood, Western. Noes, Representative Bear. Representative Greer, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Greer?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the Committee of the Whole rises report, it do so the recommendation that House Bill 9 do pass. For an explanation of the bill, I'll turn it over to my good friend from House District 54.
Representative Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and House members. I need to give you a little bit of history to help you understand why this bill, why we did what we did. As we went into the interim this last year, the executive branch and one of the agencies that oversees business interests in the state came to us because there was a challenge for them to, in the Business Ready Community Program, to allow participation in the program by either one of the tribes in our state. And if you was to happen to look on in 912-601 on the Business Ready Community Program, it says it's the purpose of this article to promote economic development at the city, town, and county level in order to create additional economic health and stronger state economy. And then if you go over, that's in A, and if you come down to H, it has this language. The council may enter into a cooperative agreements with the Eastern Shoshone Tribe and the Northern Arapaho Tribe in order to promote the purpose of this article. Now, remember, the purpose of the article is to create additional economic health and a stronger state economy. And so what our agency was telling us is that as the AG reviewed this said, in order for the tribes to be able to participate in this, they had to have an MOU with the state. And that MOU had to be approved by both tribes. Couldn't be one or the other, it had to be approved by both. So if you participate in this program, if you're a city or a county, in order to get this funding, you'll sit down with the agency and the Attorney General, and you'll enter into a contract just like if you were getting a loan from a bank or having a negotiation there, and you'll develop a contract or an MOU of what guides and directs you. And so when we looked at this, our question was, so why do we have to have an MOU for the tribes to participate? Why couldn't they just be included at the very beginning when we have cities, towns, and counties? And what we found out was that back in the early 90s, when this was put into place, there was some concern that the funds couldn't go directly to the tribes, and it was to include them in that first part was some sort of constitutional question. So we called time out and had our LSO and the AG look at this, and they assured us that that would not cause a problem. So what we've done in this bill, in several of these programs, is we've gone in there and you'll see some repealers, and we've gone in there and we've repealed this requirement to have an MOU with the tribes. And then we put them up in the A section of each one of these, to where it would now read, if you looked at your bill, it would say at the bottom of page 2, it's the purpose of this article to promote economic development at city, town, and county levels levels and on the Wind River Reservation to create an additional economic health and stronger state economies. And so we do that through each of those. And then we put some conforming language, and we have to do a couple of things. If you look on page 3, we say that it could be for the Eastern Shoshone or the Northern Arapaho, not and. So either one of them could participate in it individually, or the cooperative tribal governing body. And this cooperative tribal governing body was if if the two tribes wanted to collaborate jointly to develop economics, the economy on the reservation. And to that point, if you'll come back to page 2, you'll see that we make that reference to cooperative tribal governing body and put that in 81103, the definitions of our statute. So if you go through the bill and look through there, you'll see that on each of those pages that we make that conforming language. And again, we have those repealers. And so, Mr. Chairman, with that explanation, I'd be happy, if I didn't explain it very well, to answer any questions.
So is there any other discussion on the bill? Any discussion on the bill? Question being called. All those in favor of Chairman Greer's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that bill number 9 do pass. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. House Bill 9 has passed committee of the whole. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 45. The reading clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 45, sponsored by Minerals, Mine Reclamation Bonding, Voluntary Assigned Trusts, an act relating to environmental quality. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 9, Minerals, Business and Economic Development, to whom is referred House Bill 45, Mine Reclamation Bonding, Voluntary Assigned Trusts, respectful report, same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes. Representatives Bear, Burkhart, Duncan, Air, Greer, Gray, Greer, Heiner, Sherwood, Western. Representative Greer, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Greer?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that House Bill 45 do pass. For explanation of this wonderful bill, I'm going to turn it over to the distinguished gentleman from House District 51.
Representative Western.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So folks, this bill, quite frankly, it's one I wish this body had passed 20 years ago because it would be bearing considerable fruit now, but it's a really good idea. The basic precipice is this. Some of our mining companies, whether it's Trona, uranium, coal, et cetera, the way that these bonds work for the reclamation is they basically pay an insurance company a bunch of money, and the amount they're paying year after year continues to go up and up and up. And that money is basically going right into the pocket of these insurance companies. It's just pure profit for them. So the idea came as, well, what if we took the amount that they're paying on those bonds and they paid it into a trust that the state treasurer's office would manage? That way, the corpus, the principal stays there. Plus, it obviously earns income and returns through investment opportunities. And so when eventually it came time to reclaim those bonds, after a certain amount of time of paying into this trust, these mining companies, not only do they have the full bonding amount they need to reclaim that miner, but they also have all the returns generated over years of that money being invested. So at a very high level, that's what it is. It maximizes the mining company's money and the money they're paying for these bonds. And it's a benefit for the environment because the reclamation happens on schedule. And it's a win for the state because it generates revenue on behalf of the trust. So that's at a high level what's going on. I know we've kind of had a long day, so I don't want to go too into it, but more than happy to answer questions.
Seeing no discussion, question being called. All those in favor of Chairman Greer's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that bill number 45 do pass. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. House Bill 45 has passed committee of the whole. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 30. The reading clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 30, sponsored by Education, School Finance, Increasing Cash Reserves, an act relating to school finance. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 4, Education, to whom is referred House Bill 30, School Finance, Increasing Cash Reserves. Respectful report, same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes. Representatives Andrew, Connolly, Harshman, Nyman, Newsom, Obermueller, Paxton, Summers. Excused, Representative Brown. Representative Paxton, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Paxton?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that House Bill 30, School Finance Increasing Reserves, do pass, and I turn the explanation over to the good majority floor leader.
Majority Floor Leader Summers.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Members of the 66th, I bring you House Bill 30, School Finance Increasing Cash Reserves, and ask for your favorable consideration. House Bill 30 allows districts to increase their cash reserves from the current 15% to 30% for a period of 4 years. After 4 years, cash reserves would have to revert back to 15%. This bill will allow districts to save money from the federal infusion of grant dollars and then utilize it judiciously over the next 4 years rather than have to spend it all immediately. This bill also helps recapture districts deal with the fallout from the passage of the yearly ad valorem bill, which forced district business managers to become revenue forecasters. A larger reserve allows districts more flexibility if their forecast is inaccurate. House Bill 30 does not allow this added reserve to be utilized for capital construction. Mr. Chairman, I will quickly walk you through the bill. Really on page 1, we go into 2113-313E and we amend it. And the meat of the bill is on page 3 and 4. And on page 3 for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2022 through the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2026. Basically, that's the period that it will rise to 30%. If you move over to page 4, you'll see that a district's cash reserves that may be increased from 15 to 30% for the preceding fiscal year shall be accounted for and reported separately and shall not be transferred or expended for the purposes of capital construction. And Mr. Chairman, I would stand for any questions.
Representative Stith.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I believe I support House Bill 30 because it seems like the school districts are going to temporarily at least need to be able to save more than the 15% cap of their annual budget. Because many of them, if you look at the sheet of how much money they already have in their reserve accounts, they're bumping up against the 15% maximum savings already. Through the ESSER 1, ESSER 2, ESSER 3, the school districts across the state received over $300 million, right? There was a fee taken out by the Department of Education. So in the most recent ESSER 3, they got $270 million. So they're like awash in money right now. And they have to spend that by December 31 of 2026, I believe. So it does make sense temporarily to increase, I believe, their savings. Okay, so to make this a question, if it's the case that they've got too much money, they need to bust their cap and double their reserves, then isn't it the case that the external cost adjustment is something they don't need right now? Because they've got too much money right now, right? In other words, if we vote for this, doesn't that imply that they're not going to need the external cost adjustment?
Majority Floor Leader Summers.
So, Mr. Chairman, thank you, and thank you for the question. So one thing we don't know, because we did this early, is what they actually will be able to save using the ESSER monies. So we're not sure how much that will be, but we just want to give them that flexibility. So no, I don't know that it means that. I don't know that they're awash in money. They do have restrictions on some of that. I know 20% of it has to go, the last ESSER pile has to go to taking care of those students that have kind of lost out educational wise during the COVID. And they can in fact use some of it for bonuses, but it's certainly not an ongoing thing. And so we don't know how much there is. And I can tell you on just the normal 15%, and I realize my districts are different because they have a lot of oil and gas in them, or mostly gas. But the amount of NOVCs, notice of valuation changes we get over time, force us to have large cash reserves to pay that money back if a company decides that they're going to change their valuation. And really 15% is not that much to do cash flow during year, and recapture districts, it's tight. And so, and then when we added this on, when we went to yearly ad valorem, the challenges, and I heard it from both of my districts. This bill was drafted before I heard this, but both of them are having challenges because now they have to be a forecaster and provide that forecast on a given date. And I think we may have to change that if things, but anyway, they could get kind of in a rush. So no, I don't think that is accurate. Being an education guy, but certainly we want to give them some flexibility. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman Paxton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Also, there's a real issue, especially with smaller districts where the cash flow thing can be influenced by a lot of different factors. But one of the big things is special education programs 100% reimbursed, but it has to be reimbursed after it's given. And so if you have even one student that requires out of district replacement, that can run into an awful lot of money. And so I don't see that, even the 15% is marginal in some districts. And certainly I don't think they're really awash with money right now, given the strings that are attached to the money.
Is there any other discussion on the bill? Any other discussion? You ready for the question? Question being called. All those in favor of Chairman Paxton's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that House Bill 30 do pass. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. House Bill 30 has passed committee of the whole. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 46. The reading clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 46, sponsored by Minerals, Partnership Challenge Loan Program Amendments, an act relating to the Wyoming Economic Development Act. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 9, Minerals, Business and Economic Development, to whom is referred House Bill 46, Partnership Challenge Loan Program Amendments. Respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Bear, Burkhart, Duncan, Air, Greer, Heiner, Sherwood, Western. Noes, Representative Gray. Representative Greer, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Greer?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that the committee of the whole rises to report it do so with a recommendation that House Bill 46 do pass. For an explanation of the bill, turn it over to the gentleman from House District 31.
Representative Bear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this bill addresses 5 programs for the Wyoming Business Council. These are loan programs. And you'll see in this particular bill that we are removing one program that hasn't been being used. We're changing the name of one program, and we are adding 2 new programs. So I'll get into more detail of those. We're changing the name of the bridge loan to the 50/50 loan. This has to do with how banks interpret that bridge loan. The terminology is confusing to them based on what USDA loans and other types of loans that they work with the federal government. So by our changing the name, it just makes it less confusing and probably will lead to more participation with this program. Again, I want to back up just a moment and just say that we spent a lot of time over the interim working on the Wyoming Business Council, what the statutes that they operate under were. And this is one of the programs that we saw a lot of work going into it. And as you can see, there's a lot of enthusiasm in our committee for getting this particular program moved forward. So the 50/50 program is going to be changed, or is the new name of the old bridge loan program. The challenge loan program has some changes in the way that we match. It used to be 50/50. And this, by the way, is an economic development loan. So the communities would bring 50% to the table, and the Wyoming Business Council would bring another 50%. Well, because of the liquidity of many of our smaller communities, that's really a high threshold. So we're changing the threshold to 20% for that community, and the state will contribute 80% to those loans. Again, these are loans, and I use that word so that you understand that when the money comes out of our investment account, there will be money put back into it based on payment plus interest. So this is a good program for the state, and it does create economic growth. The loan guarantee program. This is one that has not been being used, and so we're eliminating this program. If this bill passes, you'll see in on page 6 and on page 8 that as of July 1st, we will no longer offer this program. The next program in this bill is the contract financing program. And what this is, this allows businesses to come and ask for a loan up to $200,000 to take care of a single project. They need more inventory because COVID happened and they happen to be selling masks. This allows them to go and borrow money to get that particular product, whatever it is that they need to deal with an increase in demand or a change in the business environment. There are sideboards on this. One of the things is that the corporation asking for the loan has got to bring 2 denials to the Wyoming Business Council from banks. This is to ensure that we are not competing with the private sector. We're not competing with banks. So we're ensuring that they have at least attempted to get a loan and been denied. And then the Business Council would determine whether this is a viable investment where the return would be available to make the payments. And lastly, this is a program that I'm very passionate about. It's called the Succession Loan Program. One of the things that I've noticed since I moved to this state is that many businesses in my area of the state, they operate for 10, 20, 30 years. A lot of people entrepreneurs are putting a lot of love and effort into their business. They come to the end of where they really want to work that hard, and I see the doors shut. And now something that has been providing a service to the community is gone. And a few years later, when a new entrepreneur realizes that, gosh, there's a demand for this, someone else begins making an investment and it becomes a huge investment. The community has lost a couple of years opportunity to be served by that business. And the real argument here is what's happening to our middle class. It's the middle class person that needs to be able to move forward without having to start from scratch. And this is a way to do that. If they have the experience in the business that's asking for the loan, they have an opportunity to get a loan through the state for what we would call blue sky, something that banks today are not loaning on. And so the bank may loan on the assets of the business, but not on the blue sky, the customer base, all the things that are of value to the new owner. But the bank can't loan on it or won't loan on it. So this is a way to help our middle class by giving people who have that opportunity to take over a business, keep that rolling and succeed from the previous owner. It will help our Main Street businesses. So I just think this is a great way to really improve what the Wyoming Business Council is doing and what we are doing with our taxpayers' dollars to help our communities. I did ask the Business Council how much demand there was for this, and they had stated that just last week they had a call for one of these types of loans. And so we know that once we set something up like this, there's need there and we can start meeting that need. And that's not the first one. There's been many over the years, and that's why the Business Council came up with this idea. I think it's an excellent idea. And with that, I stand for questions.
Representative Washut.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question. This idea that 2 banks have told a business that they're not eligible for a loan, been rejected twice, and yet the Business Council is going to deem that to be a viable project. Can you give me an example of a business situation where 2 banks would say thumbs down, but it makes sense for the state to still loan them the money? Thank you.
Representative Newsom.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A question that I had was in the bill, and maybe I overlooked it. I didn't see any real loan criteria other than the denial of the banks. Wondering about interest rate, how that's determined, and any other loan criteria that would be considered. Thank you.
Representative Bear. Representative Bear. Oh,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To the good bringer of the question from House District 36, the two loan denials. I'll give you an example. The blue sky in the succession loan or the contract loan, where you're looking for a product, you need to get that product to get up and going. A lot of times the banks have certain rules already in place where they will not loan on those types of items. Doesn't mean there's not value there. It's just that the banks haven't got it within their system to be able to loan in that regard. In fact, we discussed in the committee that it may be difficult to find two banks to say no, because there may be no banks in your community that even offer something close to that. So there may be a demand to have to go out of state just to get one of that second loan denial. So I don't think it's a matter of a lack of being able to pay the loan back. It's actually a lack of banks loaning in that area of business.
Representative Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And members, I encourage you to support this bill. One of the things about the bank denial or the loan denial had to do with the fact that they do not want to, the WBC does not want to compete with local lenders. So one of these, couple of these provisions are in here specifically so that they don't compete with lenders locally, to encourage them to go to them first. And so a lot of this with the blue sky is so that a local lender will finance the assets of the business, and then the WBC will finance the blue sky portion so that it allows the succession to continue. And then the other part of the bill with the contract is that maybe this person would be able to go out, gets this great contract, and for example, for all this furniture for this project, they may not have the cash on hand, but they have all the other credentials and be able to do this. So, but WBC would then be the second person, just like insurance, if you had to roof your house. So WBC would be a co-signer on this contract, and then they would be able to forward them the funds. They'd be able to purchase all the materials or the furniture or whatever. Then they would be able to finish this contract. When it comes time to be invoiced and then receive payment, WBC would be paid off first, and then any remaining profit would then go back to the contractor. So they would be able to build up their inventory or their reserves and such, and then be able to do it on their own. So it's a way to someone to be able to build up their collateral.
Representative Nyman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess as I was listening to the testimony on this, it just kind of keeps going back over in my mind, and I appreciate the testimony of another representative that spoke. You know, banks are in the business to make money, and banks are in the business to invest in things that are going to make a return, and they expect the ability of that person that they loan to have a plan put together that is workable, that is feasible, you have to explain why this is going to work, and they'll loan you money. And it concerns me that we would require, in order to qualify for this, that you've had two banks and their loan organizations look at it and say, you know what, we just can't do this. I mean, even on a short term, and I can speak from personal experience, if it's a good deal, local banks will go out of their way to make sure that it can get financed, because they're there to build business. They're there to make interest. So it concerns me in this situation that we're following up on banks that have decided these opportunities, as we could say, are not viable for them. So,
Chairman Greer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All great questions. Okay, so this is the challenge loan program. Challenge loan. But why do we have challenge loan program? Is because there are, and they call them niches, but there are these cracks for people to get financing with good ideas. That's also part of the economic disaster loan program is this, okay? Now, the Minerals Committee gets a report every year on all these loans and the payback on it, and the default rate is very, very low. The only chance you'll see that, and I just happen to know one from my county, and it was a farmer that went bankrupt. That was the only bad debt on this for millions and millions of dollars through this list. So it's an economic, excuse me, let me go back here, challenge loans, okay? So the answer is that within the rest of the program is the interest rate that is set, and how the loans are vetted and how the collateral is taken is part of this program that's been in existence for a long time. Okay, on the issue of the two banks, we debated whether to have those denial letters in committee. And here's the fact is that if you've got a long-standing relationship with your bank, you can get a line of credit to fill that gap. But if you don't, if you are a startup, very new, getting a new idea, banks will not collateralize a contract. So a contract is, you know, a well-known corporation or business in town is going to order 10, I don't know what you want to say, you know, 10 manifolds from you, from your new welding shop. You can go buy the equipment for that, buy the special metal, and then come in, machine it and weld it and sell it to them and get started. I think it was said, this is a good way to help middle-class people start to thrive rather than everything go to the very wealthy. The succession planning program, quite frankly, came out of some of the members of our committee talking. And diverse members of our committee, I might say, who all recognize that mom and pop businesses have been on Main Street for 20 or 30 years or closing down around this state. And then what's happened is the box stores are coming in and filling whatever demand is there. So mom and pop businesses, they put everything into that for their entire life. And then they go to sell it, and all they can get, okay, usually it's a manager or it might be somebody new in town that says, hey, I'd like to run that sporting goods store. I'd like to run that restaurant, that bike shop, you pick it. And they go to the bank, and the bank says, we're going to loan you 40% of the value of the inventory and 30% of the value of the shelves. And that's about it. So where this program comes in is it helps coordinate with the local bank. We required a local lending institution to join in on these loans with that and allow some of these businesses to be able to transition. So that's what we're doing here. So hopefully, if there's any more questions, more than happy to ask them. This has been these programs within this Challenge Loan Fund have been some of the more successful components of the Business Council by far. And it's because they fill those gaps where the banks come up short. And they're helping. So I vote.
Any other discussion on the bill? Ready for the question? Question being called. All those in favor of Chairman Greer's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that House Bill number 46 do pass. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. House Bill 46 has passed committee of the whole. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 29. The reading clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 29, sponsored by Education, Hathaway Scholarship Amendments, an act relating to Hathaway Scholarship Program. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 4 Education, to whom's referred House Bill 29, Hathaway Scholarship Amendments, respectful reports, same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Andrew, Connolly, Harshman, Nyman, Newsom, Obermueller, Paxton, Summers. Excused, Representative Brown. Representative Paxton, Chairman.
You have heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Paxton?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that House Bill 29 do pass, and I turn the explanation over to the good majority floor leader.
Majority Floor Leader Summers.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Members of the 66th, I bring you House Bill 29, Hathaway Scholarship Amendments, and ask for your favorable consideration. Mr. Chairman, Your Education Committee took up the interim topic of the Hathaway Scholarship, and House Bill 29 is the recommended amendments. House Bill 29 allows working students to take less than 6 hours per semester and still remain eligible for the Hathaway. The Hathaway expenditure account receives investment earnings throughout the year, but is required to make scholarship payments to higher education institutions in the fall and winter prior to when full investment earnings are received. The Hathaway Reserve Account cash flows the expenditure account to ensure payments are made to the higher education institutions. At the end of each fiscal year, June 30th, the expenditure account is zeroed out and transfers all funds remaining in the reserve account. Thus, the reason the expenditure account relies on the reserve account is to cash flow payments. This bill combines the two accounts into the expenditure account, no longer requiring moving funds from one pocket to the other pocket for purposes of cash flowing the expenditure account. This bill modifies the spending policy or the trigger to tip funds into the Hathaway corpus. The current spending policy is 4.5% of the 5-year market average, meaning any funds in excess of this amount in the reserve account are currently transferred to the corpus. This bill increases the spending policy to 9%, and the tip would be from the expenditure account since the reserve account is no longer used. This change would allow more funds to be retained available for expenditure, but the bill also allows the expenditure account to be invested in Pool A by the state treasurer to attempt to avoid any loss of investment earnings on funds that would have been deposited into the corpus. House Bill 29 provides for a small increase, approximately 5.7% in the Hathaway scholarship amounts. Since the inception of the Hathaway Scholarship Program, the legislature has only provided one increase of 5% in the 2014 budget. This increase would cost approximately $850,000 per year. Currently, we spend about $1,700 to $1,800 million a year on scholarship. These numbers came from the office that governs our treasuries in testimony before the committee yesterday. Over the past 14 years, there have only been 2 years when the investment earnings were less than the expenditures, relied on the reserve account to cover the modest shortfalls. The Hathaway corpus is growing and can afford this increased scholarship amount. During the last 4 years, the reserve account has tipped $25 million into the corpus, and it has tipped $130 million over the lifetime. And I can't remember when that started, but it was the early 2000s sometime. House Bill 29 has two nominal $1,000 appropriations to the Hathaway corpus to give the body the opportunity to add some of our one-time dollars to the program if it chooses to do so. Mr. Chairman, I will walk you through the bill hopefully very quickly. So, Mr. Chairman, on page 1, we go into 94715 permissible investments. And so you can see on page 2, line 19, monies in the following funds shall be invested in Pool A. And so it adds Romanet 16 and allows the Hathaway Scholarship Expenditure Account to be one of those pools of money invested in Pool A. And then in 3, we go into 2116-301, and you can see that we amend Romanet 14 satisfactory academic process. Used to be 6 semester hours, now would be just 50% of the semester hours attempted per semester. And this really allows for those working adults to not have to take a full 6 hours. They may only be taking one course. And so it's just trying to give working students a little more flexibility. And then page 4, we go into 2116-1302, Hathaway Scholarship Expenditure Account. You'll go down there and see on line 1516, talks about investment in Pool A. And then the interest and other earnings from the amounts from the expenditure account shall be credited to the expenditure account. Obviously, we're getting rid of the reserve account. And then, Mr. Chairman, on 5, as soon as possible after the end of each fiscal year, beginning on July 1st, 2022, the state treasurer shall transfer monies from the expenditure account to the corpus. So this is that tip now from the expenditure account. And it's once it reaches 9%, that's probably the largest policy decision, what percentage that should be. And then, Mr. Chairman, if you go down 2116-1304 Hathaway Opportunity, and then you can see on 6 where we begin to change these scholarship amounts by roughly 5.7%. And you'll see those changes on 6 and 7 and 8 and 9 and then 10 as well. That's your 10 is your need-based scholarship, and 11. And then if we go to the very last page, well, not, maybe it's not the very last page, but page 12, you'll see the repealers. And so I always like to tell everybody what the repealers are. So 2116-302B eliminates that reserve account. And 2116-309B little I allows the use of the reserve account, but it's not needed now. So that was how you use the reserve account, which is no longer there. And then you can see section 4 was to put $1,000 from the general fund to the Hathaway Scholarship Endowment Fund. And then the other $1,000 to the Scholarship Endowment Fund in a different time period, one in 23, one in 24. So if the body wanted to add a little money. And so with that, I would stand for any questions.
Madam Chairman Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have a question. Back on page 3, in the definition of satisfactory academic progress, I just want to make sure if I understand or if it needs a little rewording. So it says if the student completes at least 50% of the semester hours attempted per semester if enrolled for less than 12 semester hours. So let's suppose the student signs up for 10 credits, 2 2-credit classes and 2 3-credit classes. And in October, the student drops 2 classes and then has a C in 1 2-credit class and a D+ in a 3-credit class. Is that satisfactory academic progress? I mean, I'm kind of puzzled by the attempted. It seems like if you started off with 4 classes and halfway through the semester you drop 2 and you're not doing great. I mean, maybe that's just me, but I don't think if my kid came home with that, I would be calling it satisfactory.
Majority Floor Leader Summers.
So, Mr. Chairman and the good chairwoman of labor, this, if you got better verbiage, I'm good with it. But the idea was to allow a student to do less than 6 hours. And we've had some cases given to us, particularly like some CTE things that may be just a credit course. And so we tried to figure out, well, what is satisfactory academic process? So we decided instead of tying it to hours, just tie it to how many hours you attempted. Now, if you have a better mousetrap, I'm good with that. And maybe one of my members in education will remember something differently than that and bail me out on this. Thank you.
Minority Floor Leader Connolly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And if we want to work on some different language, that would be totally fine, because honestly, another member of the body asked me about this sentence as well. And that question was about, you gave the example as well with what if a student earns a D+, right? That doesn't sound too satisfactory to me. And the answer to that one was, it all depends on your major. Most majors define satisfactory academic progress as a C or better in all classes. Others, it's a C or better in required classes, but not in an elective. And so a D in an elective would be acceptable as long as you have that overall GPA of a 2.0. Right, so you could balance it out there. And so again, as the good majority floor leader said, really the attempt of this is to really allow for students to continue their eligibility with the Hathaway when they're going part-time, which right now is really complicated, and trying to kind of ease it up so that the Hathaway works for those students as well. But if you want to work on some language, I'd be happy to work with you.
Is there any other discussion on the bill? Any other discussion? Question being called. All those in favor of Chairman Paxton's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that House Bill number 29 do pass. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. House Bill 29 has passed committee of the whole. Next bill for consideration is House Bill 80. The reading clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 80, sponsored by corporations, campaign reports, amendments, an act relating to campaign reports. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 7, corporations, elections, and political subdivisions, to whom is referred House Bill 80, campaign reports, amendments, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes. Representatives Blackburn, Burt, Clausen, Duncan, Air, LeBeau, McGuire, Roscoe, Swanitzer. Representative Swanitzer, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure? Chairman Zwanitzer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move when the committee of the whole rise to report it, do so with the recommendation that House Bill 80 do pass. There are no standing committee amendments, and I'll quickly manage the bill. Again, committee, this is just a cleanup in our election law that we're taking out, that if you're a political action committee, you don't actually, I would just call it a loophole right now that says your political action committee has to spend money. And so what the issue is you have large PACs from out of state or from our nation's capital, and they can funnel money into a Wyoming PAC, let's call it a shell PAC, and they can funnel money out of it. And technically they can still do that. We're just making sure they have to account for it. And so again, these are large expenditures that come through potential political action committees in our state. Money comes in, money goes out different places. It's a little shady, but at least we're going to account for it. And if a final order against one of these does happen, you'll see that the penalty, instead of just being $500, is now $500 per day until they report. And that would be in conjunction probably with the Federal Election Commission or in other states taking the similar enforcement action on bad behavior among political action committees. Would encourage your support.
Any discussion on the bill? Any discussion? Question being called. All those in favor of Chairman Zwanitzer's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that House Bill number 80 do pass. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. House Bill 80 has passed committee of the whole. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill number 43. The reading clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 43, sponsored by Travel, Trophy Game, Big Game, and Wild Bison License Allocations, an act relating to game and fish. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 6, Travel, Recreation, Wildlife, and Cultural Resources, to whom is referred House Bill 43, Trophy Game, Big Game, and Wild Bison License Allocations. Respectful report, same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass with the following amendments. Ayes. Representatives Banks, Flitner, Haroldson, Jennings, Knapp, Newsom, Sweeney, Williams. Noes. Representative Winner. Representative Flintner, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure? Chairwoman Flitner.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I move that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that House Bill 43 do pass. And I further move the House Standing Committee or the House Standing Committee amendment. Good representatives, your Wyoming Wildlife Task Force began work in June of 2021. It is charged to study top priority wildlife policy issues facing the state related to the allocation of hunting opportunity, sportsman access, and other issues. The topics will be identified by the task force for study over an 18-month period with the goal of presenting conclusions and recommendations to not only this body, the executive body that oversees wildlife and sportsman issues, and also our chief executive in order to support decision-making on Wyoming's wildlife resources. The first piece of work to come from the task force is before you today, House Bill 43. It passed out of that task force unanimously after hours and hours of public input and task force debate. The bill is a consequence of two public concerns: increased demand for hunting and fishing licenses, particularly related to moose, bighorn sheep, mountain goat, and bison, and decreasing numbers of licenses issued for those species. Increasing the allocation of licenses for residents and decreasing the number of licenses for non-residents will improve resident drawing odds. Presently, moose are currently drawn at 80-20, bighorn sheep at a 75-25 percentile, and that's resident, non-resident, mountain goat 75-25, and bison 80-20. Bison is the only species where a licensee's ability to apply in the future is predicated on whether they harvest an animal or not. Prescribing that hunters can only receive one of these highly coveted licenses per species in their lifetime will remove from future draw pools those who have already had the opportunity to hunt for these species, which will slightly improve drawing odds. It will also ensure that a person does not receive 2 licenses before another hunter successfully draws their first. The once in a lifetime provision does not include ewe lamb bighorn sheep, cow calf bison, or cow calf moose. And the reason being that these are issued to manage populations, and future applicant pools would potentially be impacted if these licenses fell under the once in a lifetime provision. The fiscal impact to the agency that oversees wildlife is due to the reduced number of licenses that would be issued, and it is minimal, as you will note on the fiscal note. And there is also a cost for computer programming to the agency that would have to implement these changes. And Mr. Chairman, I would further move the amendment, and I'll speak to that at this point. The amendment is a conforming, or an amendment rather, that provides for conforming statutory language. It was brought to your committee number 6 by the agency that oversees our wildlife. And I would call for your vote if there are no questions.
You've heard the motion on Standing Committee amendment. Question being called. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Standing Committee Amendment number 1 has been adopted. We are back on the bill. Chairwoman Flipner. Representative Walters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this time, I would withdraw Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1.
Thank you. We have more Committee of the Whole amendments. Majority Floor Leader Summers.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I'd like to move Committee of the Whole Amendment number 2 to House Bill 43 and ask for your favorable consideration. So, Mr. Chairman, the good chair of TRW and I are the members from the House that sit on the Wildlife Task Force. I didn't realize how, I knew their issues were contentious in all of, regarding hunting issues and that. I didn't realize how contentious. But one thing that the committee could finally agree on, and it was fairly rapidly, was this idea of a one-time license for the big 5, for those species she identified, that the good chairwoman identified, and that we would go to 90-10 on the big 5. The bigger controversy, of course, is 90-10 on other species. This still impacts outfitters, but it was, and it impacts out-of-state license applicants, but it was one thing we could agree on. And so when this draft went, after kind of the task force looked at it, and it went to the good chairwoman's committee, they amended in some stuff that I want to try to take out to preserve the intent of that task force. That doesn't mean you all can't do it, but just so you understand. And so what it did is in this bill, if you go to page 2 and you look at that top piece, this is the commission, this is the competitive raffle licenses. So the commission may, by rule and regulation, establish a process to issue competitive raffle. We did not go in there and make that a one-time opportunity. This is a moneymaker for the game and fish. For that, I shouldn't say that, for that agency that manages our game and fish. And the intent, we could still debate that in this task force, but it was never debated. And until we understand the monetary implications of that, I don't think we want to do that. And so really, when you look at that and then you go into 7, it's really page 7, it's really the same thing. It's stripping out that amendment, which would, and so on page 7, if you go to around lines 15, you'll see that the governor, the commission shall annually issue up to so many complimentary licenses. And this would make these one time. And the whole idea here is they issue these usually to conservation efforts for the species, and then they're raffled off to individuals with money to make money for conservation efforts to put wildlife habitat projects on the ground. It was not our intent in the task force to engage this. So what basically this does, this amendment, is brings it back to the bill that was brought before the Good TRW committee, which was the one thing so far we've kind of all rallied around and supported in that task force. And so, Mr. Chairman, that's it, and I would stand for any questions. And it really is a policy call.
Chairwoman Flitner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I concur with my good representative across the room. I would urge your support of this amendment. You know, it's important, these licenses and the sale of these licenses is important because the money earned goes directly to the ground. It goes right back to the resource that they're trying to preserve, whether it's wildlife or it's habitat. And, you know, if I'm selling a horse and I remove some of my bidders, I reduce my opportunity to get the highest price for my horse. So it's important that we not remove those players that are capable of providing the dollars that will go right back to the resource. So I would urge your support of this amendment.
Representative Jennings.
Well, I'm the bad guy that put that amendment on. Just so that you all know and that we're perfectly clear with this. And so I feel compelled to give the reasoning why. Wasn't intending to harm anything for the conservation people. It had no intention of that. I wanted to see that there's not a pretense of people beginning to think that if you have more money, you have more opportunity. And so I didn't want to get the picture in the people's minds of the king's deer. I had no idea we were going to see this kind of backlash for merely trying to stand up for the idea that we don't want to get to the king's deer mentality in this state. I didn't want to harm the people for this. The agency that oversees this assured us repeatedly, because I asked numerous times, are there people lined up for these licenses? And they assured us that there was. So the real question for you guys is the pushback now is that pool will dwindle, and that you will have recently, I think one of the tags went for $305,000 and place 2 went for about 300,000, the losing bidder. And so I look at that and I think, you know, I don't want our agencies to be given a picture of something that's the ordinary Wyomingite is never going to step up and be able to afford those things. And it just gives a picture here that I personally don't want our agencies to have. And that is that if you have more money, you have more opportunity. Now, it doesn't affect the person that's bidding on this license at all. They can take that license, I suppose, and turn around and hand it to whoever they want. Come back next year and do it again. Or maybe they can do 5. I don't know. So the real question, as I understand it, is do you think that group of people, of wealthy individuals who are doing it to help our resources, and it's very commendable. I'm not I don't want to harm those people, the idea of it all. I just don't like the idea that it looks what it looks like. I'd urge you to resist this amendment.
Representative Worf.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I too rise just to bring a sense of clarity. I believe I came from a state that implements a similar program to this. And I can tell you, I've seen the dark side of that, the underbelly, and it does create a situation where those with money are given more opportunity and greater opportunity at the resources that we all love and cherish. And I just want to make sure that this body is aware of what that does. The state that I refer, they also had another process for a minimal application fee of $5 that made the same licenses available through a random draw that was exclusively just for residents. That was done to bring about parity and to ensure that people that were not necessarily of means still had an opportunity to participate in a similar type program. And I don't say that to advocate one or another. I just want the body to know what this does, what this amendment does. And it will, without a doubt, allow those who have money to continue to participate if we withdraw any type of limitations on their participation. If we pass this amendment, that will take away any of those roadblocks, and they'll be able, the same people most likely that win the bids on the most sought after licenses will continue to do that year after year after year. That's not necessarily a bad thing because it is generating a lot of money for wildlife. And when you can have one animal that, you know, generates $1 million for wildlife conservation, that's not necessarily a bad thing. So I point this out just because I want the body to understand. I've lived this stuff, breathed it, and I know sometimes we have good intentions. Sometimes those good intentions bring other things with them. So with that, vote your conscience. Thank you.
Chairwoman Flitner.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And I appreciate the words. You know, one might consider anybody who gets the opportunity to get outside and in our beautiful outdoors and have access to any type of recreation to be a king. Some don't even get to do that. But at least with the dollars that can be garnered through the sale of these licenses, that it might ensure that somebody who maybe couldn't once could another time. And I would say too that the amendment does bring an issue that does need to be talked about. And both the chairman that preside over the task force agree with that principle. And I would assure you that everybody on the task force will be willing to have the conversation that the amendment that was attached in committee did, and the, you know, which is now being proposed to be removed. So I just want to assure you that we will be having that conversation. Thank you.
Any other discussion on the amendment? Oh, Representative Sweeney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On and for the amendment. So it is a great discussion, but having, number one, we have the super tag draw that I think benefits our resident hunters and those that can't afford, you know, they still have the possibility of drawing into that. Maybe the odds aren't what everybody would like, but there is that possibility. What I believe this comes from is a disagreement from certain groups on how commissioner tags and different things for these donations have been put out there. They have been tracked, and we do know what they go for. But those conservation groups, having been part of one conservation group and then another one called Hunting with Heroes. I know I'm not supposed to do that, but have benefited greatly from these donations and put the money right back into programs. So I urge your consideration of this amendment because it honestly, I believe, will hurt if this is left in play. Yes, there are other people out there to bid, but I believe to penalize some of these conservation groups one way or another, I just think it's the wrong policy. And I believe this is a great amendment. And the way the task force, I've sat in on a few of those meetings, but that wasn't their intention, and they have studied it greatly. So appreciate your support. Vote aye on the amendment and for the bill.
Any other discussion on the amendment? Question being called on the Committee of the Whole Amendment number 2. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The amendment is adopted. We are in Committee of the Whole Amendment number 3. Representative Western.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the amendment you just heard keeps the rich people in the game, which is good. It's more conservation dollars for wildlife. This amendment does that and keeps the average Joes in the game. So what mine does, in addition to the last one, is it pulls the lifetime component out of there. The reason we're doing this is because some of the folks, especially for bighorn sheep, moose, etc., takes a long time to accumulate the points and draw. It is possible to wait the 5-year waiting period, start accumulating points again, and to draw twice in your lifetime. That might mean going after a cow moose instead of a bull, but it's a way to keep some of these average Joes in the game is what it does. So I stand for any questions.
Any questions on the amendment? Oh, Majority Floor Leader Summers.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. So sorry, I was doing a little task. So I think you and I talked. So does your amendment basically take away the once in a lifetime on moose and bighorns? And I'm just going to say in the task force, that probably had the most support of anything. It did the least harm to all entities and was supported by hunters, outfitters, landowners, everybody. So it was the most supported piece of this, just so the body understands.
Representative Western.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's true. That's correct. It leaves a statute the way it was for bear and for mountain goat. That's a strictly random draw. There's no accumulating preference points or any of that kind of stuff. That stays the same. This simply just gives the average Joes the ability to try to apply for moose and for bighorn sheep again. It does happen that people draw twice. There are folks I've talked to at some of the organizations that center around bighorn sheep who really want to have that ability for folks to at least have the opportunity to try to apply for moose and for sheep again. I encourage and I vote. Thank you. If there is no further questions, I call for the question.
Question being called. Oh, Chairwoman Flipner.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I would just urge a no vote on this amendment.
Any other discussion on the amendment? Committee of the Whole Amendment number 3. Any other discussion? Question on the amendment. All those in favor of Committee of the Whole Amendment number 3 say aye. Opposed, no. The amendment has failed. We are back on the bill. Majority Floor Leader Summers. Nope. Okay. Any other discussion on the bill? Representative Winter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, I've been to several of those task force meetings, and I voted against this bill now 5 or 6 times. in committee and wherever. My concern is that the outfitters who specialize in moose and sheep and goats, they're being actually thrown under the bus for this for different reasons, but it's not good for the state of Wyoming. These outfitters have several clients who have been putting in for preference points for 20 years or better. And it's just like throwing one of these non-residents over a cliff and down into a canyon somewhere, because they've been so supportive of the state of Wyoming. And they bring their families back, and they spend lots of money in this state. And we just don't need to rid ourselves of the non-residents. Those people are pretty irritated, and we need to protect them where we can. Not to mention these communities who depend on this income in the off season. So I would urge a no vote on this bill completely. So thank you.
Minority Floor Leader Connolly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have just a question for the committee and the bringer of the bill. When I was reading it, what struck me was what you would call the 90-10, where it's now 75-25, where there is an increase in the number of resident licenses and a decrease in the number of non-resident licenses. And what I'm curious about, because this is a committee that deals with both issues relating game and fish as well as tourism, thinking about kind of that trade-off that goes there, that will we be reducing tourism and the revenue that comes from that by reducing the number of non-resident tags? So I'd appreciate a little discussion.
Chairwoman Flitner.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And I appreciate the question from the good minority floor leader. That is a big conversation, and we had that conversation because the outfitting business is about a $53 million business for both resident and non-resident hunters. 85% of that is non-resident. But the Outfitting Association really felt like they could absorb this change. For instance, with regard to bighorn sheep, there were 31 non-resident and 41 resident hunters who hired outfitters in last year. With regard to mountain goat, 9 non-resident and 10 resident hired outfitters. So there's really not a large impact there. With regard to outfitting, their bread and butter are the other species that are not mentioned in this bill. With the top 5, they really felt like they could give this away, so to speak, and not be harmed. And also too, when you talk about tourism dollars, residents do, when they go across the state and they hunt, they're buying meals in restaurants, and they're buying hotel rooms, and they're buying gifts. So in essence, they are doing the very same thing. The only change might be some impact at airports.
Majority Floor Leader Summers.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And I'm going to vote in support of this bill. But it does have an impact on certain outfitters more than others. And so there is a moose outfitter in my area that's his bread and butter, and it will impact him. There's no two ways about it. And that's the trade-off. You know, I'm going to support the bill. I'm going to try to bring on a second reading amendment, a little phase in to try to aid him a little bit. But yeah, it does impact certain outfitters more than others, but it was what the task force agreed on unanimously.
Is there any other discussion on the bill? Discussion on the bill. Question being called. All those in favor of Chairwoman Flitner's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that House Bill number 43 do pass. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. House Bill 43 has passed committee of the whole. Majority Floor Leader Summers.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And members, I'm going to add two bills to the committee of the whole list for now, and that would be House Bill 34 and House Bill 79. And I've pre-warned at least some of those folks. Once again, that's House Bill 34 and House Bill 79.
So that means that the next bill for our consideration is going to take a moment, so please be at ease. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 34. The reading clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 34, sponsored by School Facilities, State Funds, Investment and Distributions. An act relating to state funds. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 2 appropriations, to whom was referred House Bill 34, State Funds, Investments and Distributions. Respectfully report, same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Kinner, Larson Lloyd, Schwartz, Simpson, Walters. Noes, Representatives Nicholas and Stith. Representative Nicholas, Chairman.
You have heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Nicholas?
Thank you. I move the committee of whole rise and report does so with recommendation that House Bill 34 do pass. And I'll turn the explanation over to the good representative from Trona County.
Representative Walters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before you members is House Bill 34. This is a committee bill coming from the Select Committee on School Facilities. And this bill really does two things. One, it's a discussion of the money that goes into the SIPA account and then is transferred from there immediately to the school capital construction account. So this bill, the first part of the bill, eliminates that pit stop, and it also adjusts or delineates the priority in which that will occur. And so that makes it that where that's one of the high priorities as the money comes out of the SIPA account. It's that 0.45 that goes into SIPA for school capital construction. That's the first part of the bill. This is really a priority transfer priority issue. Really, I'll call it almost cleanup to make sure we address that. The second and more interesting component of the bill starts on page 2, line 21. And what this does is this, or actually it starts on page 3, line 8. This sweeps the prison savings account into the school capital construction account. It sweeps the money that is in there now, and then it sweeps all future deposits from the prison savings account into the school capital construction account. It's an easy fix if folks aren't in favor of that. The timing and priority issue first identified in the bill really is of importance. So I would ask that you not defeat this bill solely because you don't like the use of the prison savings account. And let's work on that in the next readings. If you like it, like I do, then we'll just pass it as it is and it'll be on to the other end of the hall pretty quickly. But it does help address our needs. And the reason for doing that on the using the prison savings account for schools now is we don't know what the needs for a future prison may be in 20 years from now, but we do know that our school kids need good quality schools. The account that pays for our major maintenance on schools and whatnot is deficient, and this helps make sure that we keep that account full. So like I said, that's an easy change, but we can't change it unless we get it through this reading. As I said, the first component of the bill really is a priority, transfer priority issue that is really undeterminable by the folks that make these transfers. And so this adds some clarity. And so the first component of the bill is really the most necessary of this bill. With that, I'd answer any questions.
Chairman Greer.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just so I understand, so yeah, the prison account that we'd set up was, I guess, was just a concept that was a savings account, which we're always critical of, our coffee cans, but to help us if we're in a pinch again down the road. So we're going to drain that out because if I understand where we're going to move, it's going to get utilized. And I'm not saying one use is better than the other, but we'd made a decision to try to save for the future that deal with the prison. I guess maybe one thing we can come in and maybe move it to the landfill remediation account. Could use quicker there as well. So just get I just don't understand why we're doing this at this time. I must have missed something with this.
Chairman Burkhart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Committee, I'd ask you to just, members ask you to just oppose this. Rating the prison savings account, frankly, is taking the money now that'll be needed in the future. The account was set up, it was narrowly crafted so that in the length of time in which we will probably have to build a new prison, new penitentiary, the money would have been there. And I think we calculated it out plus or minus $8 million against a probably $250 million project. So to raid that account, I think is just to take money now for instant gratification and ignore the future that'll have to be dealt with someday. So I'd ask you to oppose this bill.
Representative Walters? Nope. All right, Madam Chairman Wilson.
Thank you. This is just a question about the wording in the bill because I was looking it up rather quickly, but perhaps not quickly enough. So at the bottom of page 1, it refers to 94220, the SIPA, but then on page 3, paragraph 4, the paragraph to which the presenter was talking about taking it from the prison account. It just says on lines 13 and 14, any unobligated funds within the SIPA account. And looking quickly on the computer, the prison account is in 94220.1, and I'm not clear if that needs to be reworked, or is that just a statutory thing that can be included under 220, if I've made myself clear.
Chairman Burkhart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to be clear, if the bill does pass out, I will bring a second reading amendment on the prison account. So just so everyone understands that, I may not have been perfectly clear. Thank you.
Any other discussion of the bill? Representative Walters?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We've heard some concerns with the prison and savings account side of this bill. I think there is opportunity to fix that up in future readings. The real crux of it and the real the highlight and main point of this is that transfer priority issue. It does need addressed. So I would really ask that we pass it through this reading. I think we just heard a commitment from another representative to correct the other, or to make changes in the other parts. But like I said, that transfer priority is the main issue that needs addressed here.
Chairman Harshman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a really important bill, and I think the good representative from Carbon County will bring an amendment for his concerns, and I think talk about that on the next reading. But again, when it comes back to us, but again, it's an important bill, so I appreciate your aye vote as we move forward. Thank you.
We only need a few more chairmen to come up to the mic. Chairman Greer.
Okay, so we have the LSRA's backing school funding. We've got all these other directed sources for school funding. So if I'm reading this right now, what we're going to do is just take that portion of the spending policy amount that we've whittled down to SIPA and then have that go directly to school funding. That's what the bill does, right? So what I understand? That's how I read it. So somebody correct me, please. I've been wrong before, I think.
Chairman Harshman.
Mr. Chairman, it doesn't change, Mr. Chairman, it doesn't change any of those percentages, that 0.45%, the SIPA school CapCon. It just, we can have all these right pocket, left pocket, stop here, hold here, wait for further, and it eliminates a couple pit stops. That's what we're trying to do. And what this helps us with is really our profile, because all these things affect our profile. Some of our deficit is real, structural, some of it's paper, and the way we account for money. And so I think that's part of the deal. Now, the other part of this bill is the prison savings account. And most of you weren't here 5 years ago. Remember the prison in Rollins was falling down. We only had months to fix it. Remember that? Best 100,000 we ever spent to go in there and have an analysis of the whole thing, and a few $1,000, and we've got 25 more years for sure out of it. And so we can discuss that prison account later, I think, but the whole idea is to kind of get this flow, and it doesn't change that 0.45% of the SIPA that we've allocated that. So that's it, just eliminating the pit stop. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other discussion on the bill? Question being called on the bill. All those in favor of Chairman Nicholas's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that House Bill number 34 do pass. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Pursuant to House Rule 66B, the bill having failed a voice vote, a standing division vote is required. All those in favor, please stand. Those opposed, please stand. Having failed a standing division vote. Oh, sorry, my apologies, follow the script. Having failed a standing division vote, a roll call vote is required. The chief clerk will call the roll.
Andrew, Baker, Banks, Bear, Blackburn, Brown excused, Burkhart, Burt, Clausen, Connolly, Crago, Duncan, Eklund, Air, Flitner, Fortner, Gray, Greer, Hallinan, Haroldson, Harshman, Heiner, Henderson, Jennings, Kinner, Knapp, Larson Lloyd, Larson Dan, LeBeau, McGuire, excused, Nyman, Newsom, Nicholas, Oakley, Obermuller, O'Hearn, Olson, Ottman, Paxton, Provenza, Rodriguez Williams, Romero Martinez, Roscoe, Schwartz, Sherwood, Simpson, Summers, Stith, Stivar, Sweeney, Walters, Washit, Western, Wharf, Williams, Wilson, Winter, Yin, Zawanitzer. Mr. Speaker. Closing vote. Are there any changes? Closing vote. Flitner, aye to no. Further changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 21 aye, 37 no, 2 excused.
Pursuant to House Rule 66B, House Bill 34, having failed a roll call vote, is indefinitely postponed. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 79. The reading clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 79, sponsored by appropriations. Employment Support Funds Amendments. An act relating to unemployment compensation. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 2 appropriations, to whom is referred House Bill 79, Employment Support Fund Amendments, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Kinner, Larson Lloyd, Nicholas, Schwartz, Simpson, Stith, Walters. Representative Nicholas, Chairman.
You have heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure? Chairman Nicholas.
I move the committee whole rise and report. It does so the recommendation that House Bill 79 do pass, and turn the explanation to the good gentleman from the Bighorns.
Representative Kinner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, I bring you House Bill 79. We did talk a little bit about it on introduction. Really what we're doing here is that we are really working with the agency that came to us because at the end of every biennium, they had a situation where they had some funds that would actually just roll back into the it would sweep really back to the general fund. And what we find is the timing of it. So they came to us and said, it would be really helpful if you could help us just basically make it so that the funds didn't revert. And so if you look on page 2 of the bill, you'd see the real crux of it there on line 3. The employment support fund shall not revert. And then you can see the part that we're taking out. So this came up as a kind of a cleanup to help the agency so that they didn't have to come back to us in a situation with a supplemental bill and request some funds to kind of cover that. So really just a very simple thing, and I hope you would support it. I'd be happy to try to answer any questions that you might have.
Question being called. All those in favor of Chairman Nicholas's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that House Bill number 79 do pass. All those in favor, say aye. Oh. Please hold. So it appears that I was premature. There was a standing committee amendment that needed to be moved that was not. I did not call the vote. I asked for ayes. Chairman Nicholas, can you come to the front, please?
Mr. Chairman, I would move standing committee amendment number 1 to House Bill 79. I'll ask for your favorable consideration.
So because I haven't made a calling on that vote, we're just going to move into this motion for the standing committee amendment. Mr. Chairman, Chairman Nicholas.
Thank you. And I'll explain the standing amendment in a minute. Ladies and gentlemen, all we did was we asked the agency to report to the House Appropriations or the Joint Appropriations Committee on an annual basis so we can track the dollars that are being involved that were being reverted, just so we can monitor the process of it. Thank you.
Any discussion on the standing committee amendment? Question on the standing committee amendment. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Standing committee amendment has been adopted. We're back on the bill. Are you ready for the question? Question being called. All those in favor of Chairman Nicholas's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that House Bill number 79 do pass. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. House Bill 79, having passed the committee of the whole, Majority Floor Leader Summers.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the Committee of the Whole rise and report.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The motion carries.
I don't know how the guy could stand having the chair so short up here. I'm just saying, I had to readjust it, raise. Reading clerk, please read this Committee of the Whole report.
Mr. Speaker, your Committee of the Whole, having had under consideration bills on general file, begs leave to report as follows. House Bill 9, do pass. House Bill 45, do pass. House Bill 30, do pass. House Bill 46, do pass. House Bill 29, do pass. House Bill 80, do pass. House Bill 43, do pass amended. House Bill 34 failed to pass Committee of the Whole and is indefinitely postponed. House Bill 79, do pass amended. Representative Yin, Chairman.
Representative Yin,
I move the adoption of the Committee of the Whole report.
you've heard the motion. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, no. The report is adopted. Congratulations, Representative Yin. Reports from standing committees.
House Bill 37, sponsored by Judiciary, Juvenile Justice Data Reporting, an act relating to criminal history records. Mr. Speaker, your Committee Number 1 Judiciary, to whom is referred House Bill 37, Juvenile Justice Data Reporting, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Crago, Oakley, Olson, Provenza, Rodriguez Williams, Washit, Yin, Zwanitzer. Noes, Representatives Larson, Dan. Representative Olson, Chairman. House Bill 38, sponsored by Judiciary. Contracts in Restraint of Trade, an act relating to contracts. Mr. Speaker, your Committee Number 1 Judiciary, to whom is referred House Bill 38, Contracts in Restraint of Trade, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Larson, Dan, Oakley, Olson, Provenza, Washit, Yin, Noes, Representatives Crago, Rodriguez Williams, Zwanitzer, Representative Olson, Chairman. House Bill 6, sponsored by Select Water, ARPA funds for water and wastewater projects, an act relating to water and wastewater projects. Mr. Speaker, your Committee Number 2 Appropriations, to whom was referred House Bill 6, ARPA funds for water and wastewater projects, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Kenner, Larson Lloyd, Nicholas, Schwartz, Simpson, Stith, Walters. Representative Nicholas, Chairman. House Bill 16, sponsored by Transportation, Military Assistance Trust Fund, Authorized Users, an act relating to Defense Forces and Affairs. Mr. Speaker, your Committee Number 8, Transportation, Highway, and Military Affairs, to whom was referred House Bill 16, Military Assistance Trust Fund, Authorized Uses. Respectful report, same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Baker, Burkhart, Henderson, McGuire, Obermueller, O'Hearn. Noes, Representatives Burt, Stivar. Excused, Representative Brown. Representative Burkhart, Chairman. House Bill 17, sponsored by Transportation, Veterans Facilities Surrounded by Grazing, an act relating to state lands. Now, Mr. Speaker, your committee number 8, Transportation, Highway and Military Affairs, to whom was referred House Bill 17, Veterans Facilities Surrounded by Grazing, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Baker, Burkhart, Henderson, McGuire, Obermueller, O'Hearn, Stivar. Noes, Representative Burt. Excused, Representative Brown. Representative Burkhart, Chairman.
Messages from the Senate.
Message 100. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading by the vote indicated. Senate File 45, Military Department Annual Report. Ayes 30. Message 101. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading by the vote indicated. Senate File 57, Chancery Court Vacancy Amendments. Ayes 30. Message 102. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading by the vote indicated. Senate File 58, Wyoming Council for Women's Issues Workforce Services. Ayes 30. Message 103. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading by the vote indicated. Senate File 59, Game and Fish Fund Investments. Ayes 30. Message 104. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading by the vote indicated. Senate File 75, Deferred Annuities Minimum Non-Forfeiture. Ayes 23, noes 6, conflict 1. Message 105. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading in an amended form by the vote indicated. Senate File 2, Legislative Budget. Ayes 30. Message 106. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading by the vote indicated. Senate File 39, Fireman's Pension Plan Benefits. Ayes 28, noes 1, conflict 1. Message 107. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading in an amended form by the vote indicated. Senate File 40, Criminal Record Dissemination Military Department. Ayes 30. Message 108. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading in an amended form by the vote indicated. Senate File 67, State Funded Capital Construction. Ayes 20, noes 10. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk.
Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House adjourn until 10 a.m. tomorrow, the 18th day of February, 2022.
So members, there'll be a general file list emailed to you tonight by the Majority Floor Leader. Committee announcements. Committee announcements. Chairman Paxton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your committee number 4, Education, will meet tomorrow on noon recess to consider one bill, House Bill 31, Wyoming's Tomorrow Scholarship and Extension 3.
Thank you. Chairman Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your committee number 10, Labor, Health and Social Services, will meet tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. to consider two bills. House Bill 117, Occupational Therapy Licensure Compact, and House Bill 110, Board of Psychology Behavior Analyst Regulation, will be in our usual room in the connector.
Thank you. Chairman Greer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your committee number 9, Minerals, Business and Economic Development, will meet tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. In room E005. We will take up House Bill 125. So workplace injury assistance information guidance. House Bill 131, Nuclear Power Generation and Storage Amendments. and House Bill 135, General Regulatory Sandbox Program. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Chairman Zwanitzer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Committee number 7, Corporations, Elections, and Political Subdivisions will meet tomorrow upon noon recess in EO 5. Here are the following 3 bills. House Bill 15, Political Subdivision Club Liquor Licenses, House Bill 55, Liquor License Airport Exemption, and House Bill 87, Insurance Investment Amendments.
Thank you. Chairman Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your House Judiciary Committee has met 4 days this week already, so we will not be meeting tomorrow.
That wasn't very overwhelming support for that. Motion fails. Chairman Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your House Appropriations Committee has met 4 times and we will meet tomorrow at 8:30 a.m. in room E301 and hear House Bill 63 and 96. And yeah, thanks.
Representative Summers, Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. So here's the committee of the whole list for tomorrow. I did it quickly. So this is the list: House Bill 37, House Bill 38, House Joint Resolution 5, House Joint Resolution 6, House Bill 65, House Bill 49, House Bill 52, House Bill 16, House Bill 17, and House Bill 47.
Thank you, members. Thank you, Mr. Majority Floor Leader. So members, as you know, next week is budget week. So we're trying to get bills in the system and out the door before we hit next Wednesday, which will be 2nd reading on the budget, and next Friday, which would be 3rd reading on the budget. So I know that these are tending to be long days. It's a lot of time in your seat, but that's what we came to do. Tomorrow will be our final day for introduction on bills. I'm going to have probably 20 to 25 bills up. Everybody will have 1 bill. We still have about, I think, 12 members that haven't had a bill up yet that have an interest in having their bill up. There'll be, I think there's 17 members now have elected not to have a bill or did not have a bill. And then there'll be a couple bills. I'll have the last bill of the day, unless you think there's something in the drawer that you want heard, and then we can have that discussion. So approximately 20 bills, whatever the bills were on committee of the whole, we have 2nd reading, 3rd reading also. So we'll have a full day of probably addressing 60 to 70 bills tomorrow. So there'll be plenty on this docket tomorrow. So members, seeing no further business before the House, except that immediately upon adjournment, I'd like the entire House that wants to participate in the selection of Management Council to convene for an all-house caucus in the Supreme Court Historic or Territorial Chamber room. So this is immediately upon adjournment, please. So with that, members, we are adjourned until Friday, February 18th at 10 a.m.